Yeah, so we do have quorum. I mean, we are short a few people, but you do not have Commissioner Herring, Commissioner Duggan, and Commissioner Rivera. But you do have quorum if you wanted to get started. Yes, meeting is called to order at 7:01 PM. Chair Williams, Vice Chair Reese,
Present.
Commissioner Cornell, Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold.
Here.
And please note for the record that currently Commissioner Duggan, Commissioner Rivera, and Commissioner Herring are absent.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the approval of the minutes from September 27th Planning Commission meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review and any
Yep.
comments or corrections?
There's just one thing I saw on, let's see, top of page 3 that doesn't make sense to me. It says Chair Williams asked unless the P stipulates that. I think that just needs to be cleared up, whatever that means.
Let up here. Page 3.
Top of page 3, first line.
Call meeting to order.
Oh, no, what I'm showing is Chair Williams asked unless the PC stipulates that. It doesn't.
So I think that's a response to the previous statement that talks about Attorney Madsen was asked questions about grandfathering, and Chair Williams' response was that
Oh, I
the
see.
PC could stipulate that.
Okay.
But I did have one question. It's on page 4. And it's paragraph number 6. Let's see.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yeah,
explain.
Fisher added, recognize the town is trying to access, or should that be assess?
Are you saying page 4 of the packet or the minute?
I guess
Of the packet, sorry.
Okay, page 4 of the packet. Fisher stated which one?
Like the 6th paragraph down, it says Fisher added.
Assess, that should be assess.
Okay.
Yeah.
It said access. so-
Yep, great.
All right.
We'll get that changed.
Minor, but important.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I found. Anyone else? Find anything? Nope. Okay.
No, there's some of the best minutes I've seen. These are really, really helpful. I can go back a year when I wasn't here and understand what happened.
Kudos to Britt.
So kudos to Britt.
Mhm.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the
With
minutes
the changes indicated?
for September 27th.
Okay.
Second.
Third?
I don't know a second. Okay, that's what I thought. Commissioner, okay. All right. Commissioner Glasser, Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Cornell, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Chair Williams.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll move on to public comment on items that are not on the agenda. I think, Ron, you wanted to say a few words?
And Mayor Billy will be the second on the list.
Oh, he's
to
on the
share
list,
a
okay.
few words.
And as usual, name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
So make sure you turn on the microphone, Ron.
Ron Mitchell, 380 South Jackson. I have brought some brochures if you're interested for my application, which hopefully will be coming in November or December. So if any of you would like a copy, I'll be glad to give it to you now. Great.
Each guy get a bunch.
Autograph it.
Hmm?
Much appreciated.
Okay,
Thank you.
do you want to say anything about it now or just wait till,
I'm sorry.
did you want to say anything about it now or wait?
If you have questions, please call me.
Okay,
And I will just remind the planning commission that he's got more than 3. I would just remind the planning commission that when the application is submitted, it does become a quasi judicial. And so these handouts will need to be returned to town staff once the application is submitted.
Deal.
Okay. A reminder in effect too.
Correct.
And that'll be at a planning commission meeting?
Right, so we anticipate that the application for Ron will be submitted in about 2 weeks. And so this is the time if you'd like to meet with him before it becomes a quasi judicial matter.
Okay.
Will you send us an email?
Oh, yes, I will send you all an email to remind you also the guidelines for ex parte communication.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ron. Mayor Billy, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. I would. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Hi, everyone. Missed these meetings. Hope all's well with you all. And I just wanted to let you know, as you may already know, that John Mountain did resign, I guess, eight days ago, a week ago or so, at our at the BOT meeting on the 17th. And so when we come back, we won't be able to revisit it until November 21st. But at the November 21st meeting, the BOT will decide whether we will fill his vacancy via appointment or via election. So that's when we will really discuss it next, on November 21st at the open meeting. And then once we decide what we'll do, then the parameters of either application for appointment or petition and campaign for election will be laid out. I just want to invite you all to, since you all live in town, I think you're all registered electors. I invite you all to think about it, whether this happens sooner or later. We'll have 5 seats up for definitely 2 open seats presently, and depending on what we do, 1 or 2, come April, and then 3 seats up for reelection, I think. So, 5 seats total open. So I just want to encourage you all to consider, maybe putting your hat in the ring for BOT. And if you're not interested yourselves, or even if you are, if you have other people you think would be good in that role, please encourage them to think about it now. And people have time to think about it for a few weeks. Or more, as we figure out what we're going to do. But I just want to let everyone know that we need another trustee, and then 5 seats will be up for election or re-election in April. And that's everything. Thanks for your work in general, and sorry I missed y'all last week with the work session, and sound like it went really well, and appreciate your work in general.
Well,
Thanks.
I, for one, am considering being a trustee, Billy.
Cool. I'm good
That's
to
if
hear.
we allow him to do that.
You want to take him on full time, and
Didn't get a chance to
he
sit
gets to
down.
do both. What's that?
He didn't even get a chance to sit down. Would you be interested in any input about whether it should be an election or the board should appoint?
Well, I think probably yes, and it'd probably be the best time to give that input would be at that meeting if you're available, or write us an email or something.
Okay,
That way all the
Sounds good.
trustees could get it at once. I mean, me and Tom could get it now, but it might be best for all 6 of us to hear what you're thinking, or what any of you are thinking.
I agree. Very political. Good job.
Thank you.
We'll think about it, and if we have any names, we'll submit those as well.
Well, we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Billy.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else online or wishes to speak on any item that's not in the agenda? Okay, having heard none, we'll move on to informational items, which is the Nederland Branding and Creative Identity Plan. And Miranda, who's going to present that?
I will introduce it, and then we do have a Beckett and ET on from Godot Communications to just talk a little bit. Just for some background, the town of Nederland had previously done a Reimagined Destinations program through the Colorado Tourism Office. I think we brought it around to you at one point. It was really focused on tourism management. The town of Nederland was really never had any sort of tourism department, and so we were really looking for some feedback and resources on to how best manage the people who are already coming. They're here, we know they're here. We're not trying to add in more, but really wanted to be mindful that it's important to manage the tourists who are coming, set an expectation for what you want, how you want them to interact with your community. From the that tourism grant, the reimagined destinations, came a recommendation to work on a creative identity and branding plan. And it's through that we had an opportunity to be awarded a tourism management grant that allowed us to hire a third party to work on that branding and creative identity plan. Really, the purpose of that is through creative identity and branding, we can really identify who is Nederland, what is Nederland, what do we expect of you as visitors? It's kind of an opportunity to welcome visitors who are already coming, but let them know that we have expectations for how they're going to interact with our community. And we can do that through a really creative identity process. And so Godot Communication was one of 15 applicants who applied for this, and we ultimately chose them because they understood that the purpose of this was not to bring in new tourists. The purpose of this was to really honor who and what Nederland is, and to share the incredibleness with other people who are coming to visit us. And they take a unique approach to their branding and creative identity. It's been an honor to work with them. They have done an incredible job reaching out to our community so far, have met face to face with, I'll let them tell you how many, but a ton of people, because they want to sit down and hear from you. They don't just want to do a survey and let you answer some questions. They want to hear and feel kind of the emotion that people express around who our community is. So would love to turn it over to Beckett and ET just to share a little bit more about what they're doing and kind of some of their next steps.
By the end of this engagement, I'm going to ask Miranda to write our homepage. She's gotten so good at talking about our value. And Miranda, thank you again for doing that. I apologize to everyone for not doing it myself every single time, but I'm starting to recognize the names and the faces and the energy of the town. And I'm aware that we probably sound like a broken record at this point. As Miranda said, we're spearheading the visual identity of Nederland, not changing Nederland, but reflecting it, giving the town a chance to take a little bit of control over its own identity before outside forces do it for us, basically. So with that, I'm here for questions, just for a couple minutes here, if anyone has anything. We do have a focus group on Saturday at 2:00, which marks the end of the ideational phase of this. So for the month of October, we've met with, I'm guessing 90, 95, 100 people. There was a moment, as Mayor Billy will attest, at a very nice brewing company where the attendance got a little foggy there after a few hours, but we've heard from the people and now are moving into a more tangible, visceral, looking at colors, fonts, actual designs and things for reaction for the month of November. So questions? If you haven't been to one of these and you're dying to, come on Saturday, but our numbers are good. And then we're here recruiting and shilling for November writ large. We have not set the dates and the locations yet.
And while they are filling up very quickly for Saturday, which is the last one there, they will be at Art at the Center tomorrow, doing kind of a really great art-oriented outreach. And so y'all should come to Art at the Center, but then also have the opportunity to talk with Beckett and ET.
Yeah, please come in. And another thing to float out there, if you are part of a larger group, even if you just have like 6 friends that haven't been able to do this, it's like a dinner party club or something. If you have a group where people haven't been heard in this, or maybe a couple have, and a couple are moving into ideation sessions, and if people get caught in the gray, we are happy to schedule more sessions individually for individual groups. I think we're trying to get something together with the youth again to dig a little bit deeper. So don't be afraid to ask for custom meetings. Basically, they could be virtual, they could be in person, they could be somewhere in between ideation and the alpha beta. So no, there's no checkbox playbook here. If you run into folks that haven't felt heard or you haven't been there yourself, let me know. We can do a custom. Otherwise, sign up for Saturday and November and hang out at the art thing. And yeah, questions, concerns. They're going very, very well with just the right amount of pepper from the community to keep us on our toes. These are so surreal. I'm just talking to this like wide angled picture of the room and then everyone with their things turned off. So I'm going to assume that there are no more questions.
You have a room full of people, there may be, so hold out. Don't leave us.
Okay.
Thank you very much. By the way, where is the Saturday session?
Not it root.
Added root.
So they have also been sharing their wealth in terms of their business, moving it from business to business. So the last one will be Knotted Root. We do ask that people sign up. And so there's a link in your packet to go to the dedicated Nederland page for this this identity work. And then at the bottom is the sign up. I think there's 3 slots left. So would ask that you sign up for those.
Correct. And if you're wondering why they're so informal, for a few reasons, like, people that want to go to focus groups in a formal, sterile setting are kind of strange, and we want to bribe people with beer and coffee and snacks and things. But also it gives us an opportunity to interact with the businesses in the town in different locations. And even though they can't, a business can't sign up for a focus group, we can at least go to them and kind of get the vibe on what they're like in a given moment.
Okay, yeah, loosen those tongues with beer.
I mean, it sounds a little cliched, but we're talking about emotional, ephemeral stuff, and I don't mind somebody a beer deep telling me their favorite color. I think it's actually valid feedback, as long as there's room for people that don't want to do that as well.
Okay, any questions from the commission? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, this is Jim Reese. I'm one of the commissioners. I'm looking at your schedule and I'm assuming we're in month 1 right now. And that means
Yes.
we will be finishing up the first of the year.
Yeah. We the contract actually had we were more aggressive in our timeline than the contract, just for momentum, right? It's 3 months is a solid thing. So we set the deadline of wanting to be done with kind of the thought work, the emotion, like basically have the final design by end of November. So right around Thanksgiving there, and then taking a chunk of December to do the production work, where we're editing the documentary, transferring the look into letterheads and PowerPoint presentations and things. We do have a deadline that we're aiming for with Miranda. You may have to help me here because I'm getting my tourism things. We have the tourism management consultants have some piece of collateral going out early December that we're kind of aiming toward for this, but that is in flux, right? So we're certainly not going to sacrifice the quality of the product for an outside deadline, but like that. But yeah, before Christmas, I would love for this to be a celebration.
Technically, they have until April is when the grant is over, but Godot Communication is aiming for end of year. And some of the benefits in that is that the branding can then be incorporated into the comprehensive plan, the multimodal transportation plan, the work destination blueprints is doing, our PROS plan. So there's a lot of opportunities. Again, I agree with Beckett that there's no reason to rush it. We can incorporate those at any point in time, but it would be great as they're starting to push out some of their materials for like the comprehensive plan to have it start to mirror a lot of that same imagery.
Yeah,
Oh,
good timing.
okay. I just had one more question. It has listed in month 2 that the begin drafting the first blood designs for internal discussion. And then month 3 is final design and packaging. And, it looks like that's when it gets presented. Is there any kind of an intermediate phase where we get a rough look at what you're thinking?
That is an excellent question. What you're seeing there are kind of, contractible bullet points that are actually talking about a much more complex process. So when we're talking about alpha, obviously every engagement is different, right? Sometimes we have to do these in 2 weeks and we jump to here, your 3 options, pick one kind of thing. But for this, when we're talking about alpha, I think what we will be doing tentatively, and we're going to take this week and kind of figure out what our November is and what we need from it. But we'll begin probably looking at like image boards. We'll be looking at comp sets. We'll probably focus on color, type and structure of imagery. Like, is it illustrated? Is it photographic? These kind of things. So we'll start really high level. And start to just kind of funnel those down based on the initial focus groups with the philosophy of we're not going to put any bad choices out there. So we're not going to do that designer trick of, here's a really good one, here's one that everybody expected, and here's a piece of sludge that's going to get voted off. So we're going to try to funnel it down into a mid-November alpha/beta, where we'll actually start using the word Nederland, right? The logo of Nederland in the context of the imagery. So it's not, I hope that isn't too much of an answer there. It's really not a firm line between here are 3 options, here's your final, let's go. it's a little bit of a journey there, getting to 2 or 3 at the end that we'll kind of get buy-in on. Yeah, is that an okay answer?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Maybe this one's for Miranda. We're going to have a update in future meetings on how things are going with them.
Yeah, we'll put in our staff report
Okay,
unless we have something to share and get your feedback on.
okay, yep, because you're welcome back anytime.
And we love being here. It's
Hey.
it's a pretty, ET just got her citizenship, like officially. She's been here forever, but she just got her citizenship officially only like a couple months ago. So
Rather
this is like legit fascinating, right? So, you know, from my perspective, it's fascinating too. I'm not in local government, but from her perspective, this is like us hanging out in some exotic, cool little ski town in the Alps and seeing how their people work together and interact on a government level. It's great. Thank you for having us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I think we'll move on. We have a full number of discussion items tonight. And the first one is the use group table amendment for private childcare on public lots. Before we begin, does any commissioner have any conflict of interest or financial disclosure to make where they could recuse themselves? Did we have any, did Stephanie or Chris show up?
No,
No.
but just to know for the record that Commissioner Duggan arrived at 7:08 PM.
Okay. You? All right. Before we begin too, I just want to say that this item is really based upon having an amendment to change the use group table to allow a SRU hearing before both the PC and the BOT prior to any applications that come forward. So I would ask that the speakers and the planning commission members focus their discussion on those items rather than perhaps a potential application that will come to the town. And so Miranda, you might want to say more about
Yep.
that.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, what is before you, the catalyst for what is before you is, of course, a proposal that went before the Board of Trustees on October 3rd. And that was in regards to Teens Inc. requesting the leasing of the Old Town Shop lot for childcare. So that's not what this is about tonight, but I wanted to provide you context so you understood why this was coming to you all together. Specifically, really noting that that land is a public land, and in the use group table, allowing private schools so private elementary schools, secondary schools, state licensed grouped homes for developmentally disabled and childcare centers are not allowed on public zones. So one of the conversations really was focused around if the board really wanted to consider this and allow private schools on public lots, either the zone itself, the parcel itself would have to be rezoned, or the use group has to change in order to allow this in the use group table on a public lot. And ultimately, the Board of Trustees really felt like regardless of the Old Town Shop lot or not, they wanted to have an opportunity where they could choose to lease public lots for private childcare opportunities. But they didn't want to give up their land in order to do that. So they weren't interested in going with the rezone. They wanted to see that the use group table changed. So they asked that we bring this before you as a planning commission to see what concerns, what feedback do you have about the possibility of this changing from a no for public lots to an R requiring an SRU. There is no opinion that this should be allowed use by right. It is a special review use in all current zones where private schools and childcares are allowed. We want to stay consistent with that, but are looking for feedback from the Planning Commission regarding that recommended change by the Board of Trustees to move it from a no for private schools and childcare to an R.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that background. Does anyone on the commission have any questions for Miranda before we open it up for public comment? Anybody?
Yes, I certainly.
Okay, go ahead.
So if it was zone residential, is the school and that use the same thing would be available under review.
Correct. Yeah. So currently the surrounding neighbor, again, I don't get too deep into this specific parcel, but if someone had a medium density, high density, they could come under SRU and ask for
Outside of
childcare.
park,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
under zoning.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it is allowed under residential zones, and it's also allowed SRU in neighborhood commercial as well as general commercial. So the ask is consideration of allowing it SRU under public.
So it's SRU in any of the other zoning at this point.
Correct. It's not used by right. And as staff, we're recommending consideration of this continuing to be SRU because there are a lot of things to consider for any sort of private school or childcare facility. So keeping it in SRU is very appropriate. If this is something that the Planning Commission feels is appropriate to add to public, it should definitely stay SRU in staff's opinion. And I would argue the BOT agrees because we offered that suggestion on October 3rd that if they were wanting to look at changing the use group table, that it should definitely be through SRU.
Okay. The town's not interested in selling that lot.
I cannot speak to that.
You cannot.
Mayor Pro Tem Hold may want to, but I can't speak on behalf of the board in
I'm one
regards
of
to that.
7, one of 6 right now. I got nothing to say.
Okay. Well, no, I just wanted to put this in perspective. So, okay.
Right. So I think it's really some of their concern would be, for any of their public zones, if they were to change the zoning to be like residential or general commercial, it's no longer than a public zone. And so their desire was to maintain public zones, but open up some of the opportunities for what could happen on a publicly zoned lot.
Okay. Any other questions at this point?
So I'm a little concerned and I wonder what the impact would be long-term on this if then, because we're not considering what it would be used for, but at any point, if it is leased to somebody else, doesn't that inhibit the opportunity to use it for parking or public housing because it's already been used? And the proposal I saw was a 99-year lease, which ties it up indefinitely, pretty much.
Right, so I guess I really can't speak to that. That's a board of trustee decision. Ultimately, if they feel that they want to lease their town-owned parcel, they would enter into a lease agreement with various terms. And then I know, again, for this specific example, some of the conversations do talk about like what are the contingencies if the childcare doesn't work or if the schooling doesn't work, town then acquires the building and uses the building for something else. I mean, I guess where I don't want to get lost in the weeds here is related to these different applications because those are decisions the board's going to have to make. But ultimately, they are interested in starting to do more public-private partnerships without losing their land in the process. And so that is going to mean opening up the use group table in many ways to allow them to engage private schools in this case, or private childcare to operate on their land.
Okay. Other questions? If not, I'm going to open it up to public comment. You have 3 minutes. Does anyone want to speak? May? 3 minutes, name and address. You know the drill.
May Gerald, town of Nederland. I don't know. Yeah, it is. First, I wanted to ask Tom, was it a unanimous decision by the board to approve or to ask the planning commission to change it? Is that your recollection?
To change what?
To ask the planning commission to change the use group?
Brenda?
So there was a nod of 4. All the direction the town received was through a nod of 4.
A not a 4,
Yeah.
okay. So I don't think it's right to represent this as a total eclipse of the heart of the board. They've had 1 meeting, no public input to speak of. So when you say the board of trustees as directed, we had a nod of 4. That's not really a resolution or anything like that. So I think it's been kicked back to you. And this year already, we've had some discrepancy between the planning committee and the board. For example, Ron's parking proposal. And you guys, and I thought very correctly, stated all the reasons why he didn't want to rezone. And then the board went ahead and we know the rest. So, I did include the Town of Lyons park map. Did you guys get my email?
Yes.
So, and I'm really interested in learning more from Lyons. As Dave said, there are lots of grants available. I'm probably almost out of time, but Tom, Steve asked if you had a conflict of interest. I don't know how many of us residents there are, and I don't really know where you stand on this. Do you support changing the public zoning to allow for this additional use?
You got 58 seconds, so I'll let you finish up and then.
No,
I'll move on.
I just wanted to ask you and then just yes or no.
What my position as a neighbor, and I just responded to somebody who said they had the consensus of the entire neighborhood, is you do not have the consensus of the entire neighborhood. You don't speak for me as a neighbor. My position as a commissioner and as a trustee is unresolved. My position as a neighbor is different.
Because you're one of what, about 10 properties in this little area, and you do own a significant property. I'm not saying you should recuse yourself, but I do hope you'll listen to the neighbors. The only neighbors I know that support it are people who are renting space in the trailer park that maybe graduated from Chinook, and they're not property owners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, May. All right, any other public wish to speak? Do we have anyone online, Miranda? That
We do have a few online, so I think if anyone online wants to raise their hand or start, or you if they start speaking, however you want to work that.
Hello? Hello?
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes. This is
Okay.
Kathleen Chipeye. Can I take my 3 minutes?
You made name and address, you know the drill?
Yeah, Kathleen Chipeye, Magnolia Star Route, 32-year resident and 22-year business owner. I'm against any public, land zone public, being converted into any kind of private anything, be it a daycare or housing, because then, I mean, we say we're trying to do this public-private working together. Well, the public loses, and I think it's disingenuous to say this doesn't have anything to do with the daycare center that wants to go in that's 6,000 square feet. A few things on that. If it's a daycare, only the people who have their kids in daycare are allowed to use that piece of land. If it's housing, only the people who live in the housing are allowed to use that land. So we're looking at 99.9% of the rest of the town population and the public from being able to use the land. So to me, it's disingenuous to say this isn't being considered because of the proposal that is about to be made in the future. I also heard that the daycare needed to double in size. My understanding is it's 1,500 square feet now. Doubling size would be 3,000 square feet, and they're asking for 6,000, 2 stories. I have a problem with that. But in general, public land should be kept for the public. I'd like to go back to Eric Coombs Ishmael on the swatch of land. I think it's 10 or 15 feet wide between 2 properties in Old Town, and I know that the Old Town people did not handle the situation properly and hired an attorney and sued the town. And I don't agree with that action, but I also understood when they said they got bad advice from an attorney. I agree. But in the long run, we heard about how the Board of Trustees and the other boards need to be good stewards of public land. So even though the town doesn't use that land and those people have been maintaining it, some of them, they said, for 3 generations, they weren't even allowed to buy it and pay taxes on it. A 99-year lease for $1 a year for anybody means the Nederland taxpayers are going to be paying for the property taxes. I don't know how the insurance goes, but wow, is all I can say. So again, it's public land. It should be used for public things where all of the public is allowed to use it. And I think a park in that area would go much better. And I don't believe that we should change the use groups at all. There shouldn't be any kind of, if we want to do public-private partnerships, both sides have to benefit, not one side. And the public loses. So that's my opinion. And I agree that a not a 4, I don't think should have been brought this to any consideration at all. And that'd be my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen, and thank you for trying to stick to the issue at hand.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, anyone else signed up to speak?
Hi, this is April. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great.
Add 3 minutes.
Thank you. Oh, my name is April La Liberty. I'm at 850 West 5th Street. So I am going to try and stick with the topic at hand. I feel like public land should be a win-win. And I feel like this just making a change to allow for one particular entrepreneur, well, you can't even really say entrepreneur, one particular use in town is not a great use of public lands. I agree what Kathleen said about public land should remain public land. However, there is already a resolution that has been signed for this particular lot that is not for childcare. It was signed quite a while ago. Many of us bought our houses with the presumption that we would be getting housing, affordable housing, something like that. So it feels weird now that this property keeps getting thrown in the ring. Last year we met in, I don't know, May or June, and many of us went and stood on the property and had a meeting where everyone talked about how they wanted to bring this big medical facility or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. And the issue was that it was a huge commercial building. So the neighbors are taking a stance that we don't want a huge commercial building in a residential area. It's like it would be one of the biggest buildings in town. And I know that we got some other that are bigger, but it doesn't seem like it belongs here. And the fact to change the zoning just because we want to have, we've earmarked it for something seems disingenuous. It seems like, we've pinpointed something and we're going forward. I would also agree with May. I feel like we would love to be more involved in the whatever happens there. And I do feel like that having it come to you guys a little bit half baked, where we haven't really flushed anything out. We haven't really heard from the BOT, and we've sent a lot of letters. I've only got these little responses. I feel like there's a lot unsaid on both sides. So I guess that's my position, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, April. And just a point of clarification, we're not talking about changing the zoning. We're talking about changing the use table. So, okay, anyone else to speak?
Yeah, this is Billy. Can you hear me?
Sure. Okay, go ahead, Billy.
Is that all right?
Name,
Near-
address.
Yeah, Hilton Street in Old Town. And help my daughter here at the moment while I talk to you, but just wanted to clarify one thing. The not a 4 was made on a few fronts to just continue. We asked the town to continue research on several things that would just be kind of logical due diligence next steps, one of which would be bringing this to the PC just to get your perspective on, something like a change of a use table. I don't think there's a big interest in giving away public land either way. I would kind of point out to Kathleen that, vacating land, private landowners and leasing land are kind of apples and oranges when we lease it, the town would still own it. And I'm not sure that the town pays property tax on land anyways, I could be wrong. On our own land. But yeah, the idea, one way or the other, of public land, we don't have a lot of it to give away or sell. But some, it could be looked at as things we develop for the public, be that need, things that the public needs, or be that parks, be that housing, be that parking, be that childcare, and potentially generating revenue off some public lands is also something that would be good for us to do with the land that we own. So that's clarification, just vacation of land versus leasing, very different things. And yeah, these are logical, we feel like diligent next steps. Just give us more information so we can decide what we want to do on many fronts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Billy. Now, public in person.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Lefebvre. I'm executive director of Teens Inc. And I'd just say that there's a model of this already in town with a 99-year lease where it does allow the conversation to continue. To have these conversations, in this instance, anything going on public land would have to go through the SRU process to allow conversation to continue and for the community to really weigh in on all different sides. And I think that's what, I'm just pointing that out about the conversation can continue if this is added to the zoning code or whatever, however it works. And the model I was saying is Teens Inc. has a 99-year lease on the land down there. We're in year 27, I believe, right now. And property tax, I don't believe, is paid by the town on that land. And I think that because of that, a great community asset has been able to be provided to the community at no cost to the community, as Teens Inc. raised all the money for that building and provides all the staffing for that building and provides the service to the community. So in my opinion, by allowing this into it, it allows the conversation to continue. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else, Miranda? Okay. Okay, well then, if we don't have any more comment, we'll close the public hearing and we'll take it back to Planning Commission. Let me remind you, this is a discussion item, so we won't be voting or anything like that, but we'll be providing some input to the BOT on this, so.
And perhaps I can offer just some next steps, because this would be a Chapter 16 amendment. This would have to, of course, come back to you with a public hearing on it. And so that could happen at your next meeting. You could offer direction and we bring it back to the Board of Trustees if you have concerns. I think ultimately the board was really looking for you to evaluate this and identify if you feel like this is appropriate, then we'll continue forward with drafting the ordinance and bringing it back for public hearing. Or if you have concerns, it will drive that back to the Board of Trustees.
Okay. All right. Want to start discussion? Tim?
So for me, the first and kind of most important question is, if I'm looking at the definition of public zoning in the district categories here, it says public areas in which public and semi-public facilities and uses are located, including without limitation, governmental and educational uses. So I feel like the first question is, does private childcare, secondary school, whatever the whole list was that we're proposing here, does that fit into this definition of our public zoning.
It does not. So currently in the use group table, there's a public, quasi-public use group. And under there is where you actually have elementary school and secondary schools, but those are going to be your public elementary and secondary schools.
Right.
So the difference here is this is a privately owned.
Which I exactly understand. So that I
get what you're saying. I mean, technically, the way the use group table is broken out, it does not, of course, include that private, but I do understand the spirit of what you're saying is that there is an educational component here.
Right. So if we're gonna put an elementary school there, sure, okay, but a private, as excellent and helpful to the community that it may be, it's still not a public school. So I guess that's kind of my biggest question that I would start with. So. Because I feel like if we say yes to adding this additional use, then like where does it stop? There's kind of like a new precedent set, you know? So that's just what I would want to be careful about.
So just to be clear, if there's a public use, like a school, like we talked about, that can happen with the current use table, is that?
Not used by right, but special review use, yes.
But it would still be special review.
Correct.
So we're changing this to allow private, is that correct?
Correct. That's right. In essence, yeah, bringing private schools and private childcare into the same consideration for special review use on public lots.
Okay.
And I think Steve had a great point, like this change, it's not approving the whole plan whatsoever. It's just, like you said, allowing the conversation to continue. And that's kind of, you know, I'm just trying to really think and limit my comments to just this one thing, because I've got all sorts of other different comments on, you know, the application, but they are two different things. So approving this definitely doesn't mean that the whole proposal is approved. But again, my question would just be, we allow any sort of private enterprise, you know, where does it stop from there? I think Kathleen Chippy had a great point too, you know, like the public zone land should remain public at, you know, at some level. So I think that's a great point to remember when we're thinking about what we might put on publicly owned land.
Okay. Roger, you have a comment? Question?
Yeah, I want to say, actually, everybody that's participated, thank you, Stephen. This is exactly what we needed to happen here, to have this discussion and try to see exactly what the issues are. And kind of as opposed to, so very quickly, the idea of that, oh, there was a nod of 4 and that's not right. Well, you know, it totally is I just want to say that it totally is appropriate for the people to say, yes, we should at least move forward in this discussion to try to understand what it has. And the appropriate place to start this is at the Planning Commission. So it's totally appropriate for what the Board of Trustees did, and to get it back to square one to try to start the discussion. And it's been a very good discussion. And thank you, everybody who's participated. This is one where unfortunately I don't feel that I'm actually, you know, have a dog in the fight. So I'm trying to look at it objectively. And Tim's, your comments are exactly, you know, very good and helpful. And if I have one issue, it's maybe that I have too much history of the town, you know, in my memory. And all I know, what my memory is that starting in the late 90s, when we started with the whole idea of Mud Lake and what to do with that property. In fact, actually, my history goes even back much farther than that, when I was a trustee the very first time in the early 90s with Art Yotis, the mayor, and how the State Department, that was the state shop, they moved up to Ridge Road. I'll do this real fast so we don't go on night. And then the property was available, and I actually remember having a session with the Board of Trustees. Well, why didn't we buy that for our town shop? And the fire department got it. And then finally, the fire department moved out, and that's when it became the town shop. Before that, the town shop was where the museum is, right down there, for many, many, many years. So all being said, when we finally got to Mud Lake and all these other issues opened up and the firehouse gets built, Lenny Cole, some industrial parks leave, the bus barn leaves. So that whole property there gets redeveloped. And part of the Mud Lake agreement was that we would put housing in there. And so if I have one concern or just a historical, what are we doing, was that, for 23 years, 24 years, I have always worked and we were trying to figure out how we would get to the day, get that shop area cleaned up, get it done, so we put in low-cost housing. And we've just spent how many conversations here in the last couple months about the need for affordable housing. So that is the big part for trying to make this decision. And I feel that actually both projects are or both ideas, not projects, excuse me, ideas would work. But if we would change the idea that was put forward today to allow this in public, that would not allow housing if we stay with public. So it's almost like, I almost want to feel like we should have the whole conversation go down and figure out what would be the best for that parcel before we actually fool with the zoning. And what it was for all those years, it was actually zoned residential. It was only when we actually introduced the public category to our zoning in, I think, 2015 is when public came, somewhere about that time. So we haven't had public all that year, that many times. The places where this property right here was zoned residential, not very long ago. And that's why it was just a natural discussion that, well, the housing will go there. And so I haven't really helped, it's historical, but I haven't really helped to get to the conversation any more focused. But, I almost feel that there's been a lot of conversation about wanting to keep the public category. But I sort of felt like, just without hearing everything else, that we ought to change it back to residential, and then either use would be allowed by review. So that was the kind of the thought I had of where we go, but I'm not certain that that's appropriate or would any solve anything. But so, I guess in the bottom line, it would be in a perfect world to decide what use should actually, we would want to put there in that area, and then have it actually zoned appropriately to make that fit. But that's kind of doing it kind of ass backwards, if you know what I mean. But I will admit that I am kind of torn with the idea, with this conversation we've had all summer, and the fact that for 25 years, we've been waiting, we've cleaned up the project. We actually at one time had built the housing people here, and we actually had plans. For many years, there was plans of condominiums in the town, in your office. It rolled up in the corner of, here's 4 units that could be built here. So it was 4 units, I think 4 to 6. Yep. Well, no, it just got held off. There wasn't really an issue. It never went beyond the discussion.
So
So anyhow, that's enough for me, but that's the history. And so,
well, let me ask this question. So if it's still a SRU regardless.
I agree with that.
Okay, so it still could be affordable housing.
I don't think of it as public. If it's,
So one of your discussions tonight, though, is allowing under use
I
SRU
understand.
So
housing.
it would
That's
still,
discussion. And that's why I'm
Separate.
saying I'm gonna have a hard time,
Yeah.
going with that idea because then, one way it eliminates, okay, we're opening up the avenue for one idea, but we haven't gotten any closer to, well, no, I thought we're supposed to have an open mind and decide,
well, I'm
which
just
would
still
be the
wondering
best.
if we can still go both ways. If we can still do affordable housing, because it still goes to SRU, correct?
Now, if it stays zone public,
We'd have to change the zone
Yeah.
to do affordable housing?
Correct. So currently, the use
have the
group
same
table
problem.
does have where housing is no. And so one of your later discussions is about adding on SRU for certain housing types on
Right.
public lots. In order for town to choose to develop or enter into a public-private partnership to build housing on town-owned land. So you have the same conversation, just three discussion items from now.
we do.
Yes, under the use group
And
table
that's part of, in
for housing.
Okay, well, I missed that was part of, with all the other issues okay.
Okay.
But if we were to, instead of changing the use group, just change the zoning to medium density residential, then both housing and a school like this, a daycare facility, would be allowed with review, correct?
Yes, but that is yes.
I know the.
And the Board of Trustees is
But-
not interested
But
in that.
that's,
Gotcha, yeah.
well, but
Yes.
that could be our feedback back to the
Correct.
board that maybe we should think about rezoning.
Message received.
Or, no, or we have to wait for this next, we can sit there and say, yeah, we agree with this idea, but under this next conversation or agenda item, or information item, discussion item, excuse me, that if we indeed actually embrace the idea of a partnership for housing, which we have been talking about, to me, then that's the compromise. So thank you very much, Miranda, then to point that out, that was part of, you go all the way across the tables. Because I guess that's what that whole conversation I just had was that I felt like I didn't want to shortchange one idea for the other. We need to keep both ideas open. And if that's kind of a way to do it, for right now, we're only recommending to the Board of Trustees to move forward with an idea.
Okay,
And that would work for both ways.
okay, that's fine. This is a discussion item, so may I, if you have a quick comment, could you come up to the mic, please?
Thank you, Timmy, for clarifying that about private versus public. I think that's what we're really, the core issue here. Is there a difference? I think there should be. I don't think the town should be getting into that. But in terms of the park and Roger's point, we need to decide what we want to do with that. I'd like to ask the planning committee, consider the fact that ProSap has agreed to hear our neighborhood proposal for a park. It may not include everybody. There are some people in town that are interested in this as part of a fire protection plan, flood protection for lower down, and we're meeting with RIA tomorrow. So I personally, as a resident, would love to see the planning committee give some kind of a gesture of good faith of your time's not going to be wasted to go forward so we can present you with the different options, especially since this option really hasn't been explored and it is a public use open to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So really quick, Chair Williams, there has been a request from Kathleen Chabai to identify yourself before you speak.
Okay, thank you. Tom, you had a comment?
Comment and question. First of all, thanks, Roger. Every story you tell me is helpful, and I remember some of them. But the fact that this was once residential tells me things. We talked about when we were looking at rezoning 101st Street, their history there was very helpful too. So thank you for that. I've got one other clarification earlier, somebody's asked if I had a conflict of interest. I don't vote here unless there's a tiebreaker.
Which is not a vote anyway.
Right. Okay, then but my question is a math question. 0.46 acres looks like it's 20,038 square feet. And you're talking, Stephen, about 3,000 square feet. My math would say that's 14% of the footprint, right? Okay.
Make him do
Okay.
math on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're not, remember, we're not talking about this particular project.
Okay, good point. That's that's for later.
Yeah.
That's what my math shows.
I would concur.
Okay.
Okay, the second thing I would say is this proposal, we have to stop what we're doing for a park proposal that can come in 20-some years that land's been empty, seems specious to me and a way of stopping action instead of, this could have been done last year, the year before, any time, and all of a sudden we're hearing about a park is a better use of the land. So I take that with a grain of salt. That's all.
Okay. Linda, did you have a comment?
I just had a comment on if it is a school, private school, and it is leased, as opposed to if there were public housing there in a partnership, is that a lease agreement as well with a partnership?
Yeah, so I think, if the town were to want to maintain it public, but lease the land for a developer to build housing on, it's still going to be the public-private partnership. And again, currently housing is not allowed.
Right, right. So if it were to go back to the town, does the town acquire the building as well as the property?
So that would have to be negotiated in a lease agreement. So there is conversation with most lease agreements of like what happens, what are the contingencies for if a private entity can no longer maintain, manage, oversee, operate this building, that what happens. Those things really have to be negotiated out. And our attorney, the board has asked of the plenty of not of four things, there's a series of things that the town is working on, including our attorney working with the private entity about what could that lease agreement look like. The board wants to see that. But this is just one of the many puzzle pieces that has to be assessed and why it's before you.
But those are important puzzle pieces that makes it very difficult for us to, make a broad change here.
Yeah, and I definitely understand. So when I did a recap, the board asked that we move on all 5 things together. So I do understand that there is a component of like, well, what are you going to do? We don't know. But the board did ask me to bring this forward, and I recognize that there are a series of unknowns here. And so I think ultimately the board will want to hear what are your concerns? What should they be considering? Is it that you'd rather see the rezone, or that you just don't feel comfortable making a decision without more information on the specific uses here? But I guess what I would say is the board wanted to treat this as all of their parcels. So even if, say, the Old Town Shop lot wasn't appropriate for childcare, they may own other public facilities that they'd rather lease, but still the use group table would prohibit them no matter where that childcare facility went.
So on that note, are there any private entities that are currently operating on
Introduce
publicly?
yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm Mike Dye. Are there any private entities currently operating on publicly zoned land?
So Teens Inc. is still,
Right.
it's on a publicly zoned
Okay.
land, and there's a lease agreement.
Okay.
Are there any other ones?
Not offhand, I do not believe so. Most of town's public lots have municipal buildings on it or they're vacant.
So Teens Inc. was able to do this because they're public?
Well, so I think to Commissioner Cornell's point, the public zone didn't come forward in the use group table until after Teens has already been in operation.
That's right.
It certainly
I
was
forgot.
property owned by the town.
Correct. And it is still owned by the
Just
town.
like they were all
But it was
zoned.
zoned.
There was no such thing as
Right.
public
Okay.
Right. So then when the public
or category.
zone came and the zoning map was redone, that is still a publicly zoned lot.
Okay. Any other, Jim, Linda, I'm sorry.
I had another,
Linda, introduce.
Linda Glasser. We did have discussions when we were speaking about low-income housing on that parcel of land. And it was brought up at some point about having a park there. That was part of the discussion from the public. And that was several years ago. But it was brought up in a meeting with the commissioners.
And just to add, it was also mentioned in Envision 2030. I do understand what Mayor Pro Tem Mohold is also saying, that no official proposal has come forward.
Right.
So yes, there have been definitely conceptual conversations throughout time.
Okay, Jim.
This is Jim Reese. I just want to say that I was not on the planning commission when Tungsten Village was being discussed and proposed here in town. The process was long. It was involved. It took about 2 years and many meetings of me coming and advocating as a member of our church for why that was a great need for our community. And the process really looked at all options. The SRU process I have faith in. And I would hate to say we're going to limit opportunities without even hearing. I mean, we keep jumping to a possible proposal that may or may not come to pass there. But I feel like if there's an SRU requirement attached to that, I would be in favor of that, because then we're going to look at that under a microscope. The public's going to get opportunities to come and talk. And if there's a lot of controversy, just like it was on Tungsten Village, it's going to take a long time and a lot of discussion before it gets approved. I think that that has been a fantastic building, and you can't believe the amount of opposition that our town came out against Tungsten Village, and it's fit right in as far as I'm concerned. So I for one, would say, keep it at an SRU as a requirement. I would be willing to say, yes, let's approve this change in the use group table so that we could at least consider what opportunities are out there.
Okay.
And this is Roger Cornell. I agree, and I think, knowing, so maybe I wouldn't say it's compromise, but an idea that a public-private partnership, whether it's a private daycare school or public housing, to actually introduce that into the public category by special review would be maybe the appropriate compromise. So that's exactly what I was trying to say, that I don't want to say that we should do this or do that. And it was almost having to be King, whatever his name was, Solomon, and choose which baby to save. And so if we would direct staff or that work on the idea of the town keeping the property, and it's a public-private opportunity, whether it's housing, or that would be, to me, a fair compromise and a way to make it work, that at this point, without knowing what would be there, would be a win-win for the town or for the people to at least to move forward.
Yeah, I think we win either way.
Yeah, well, that was this is Chair Williams, that was my point earlier when I was asking, could we do housing or could we do, a childcare center or a park or anything else? If we do this, and like Jim, I like your analogy of a safety net, because every time you do an SRU, we look at everything individually. We still have that option. It still comes back to the planning commission. It still goes to the board, regardless of what we say or recommend. So it seems to me, like you said, it's kind of a win-win to allow an SRU for whether it be a public-private partnership or use for public land. So, I mean, at first I was trying to balance the pros and cons, but now I seem to think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's a win-win, because we haven't lost anything if we do this. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Commissioner Tim Duggan, for some additional context, so already allowed by a special review in the public zoning are things like campgrounds and resort cabins, horse stables, fish hatchery, medical clinic, warehouses, schools, and a cemetery. So these are all things that are already allowed by special review. So we're asking, should we just add, private childcare to this list? I think that fits reasonably well with those other things.
Well, not just childcare, private
And
private
housing.
partnership of,
Right, well,
of anything.
I mean,
Could
that's
be
the thing, right?
housing or,
That was my initial
Okay.
question.
Right,
all right.
exactly. Anything that actually would be a positive for the community should be discussed under special review.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we've exhausted the discussion. So what do we need, Miranda? You need a nod from us to nod to them?
It would be nice to get a nod. So I think what would happen is the Board of Trustees is set to revisit the specific request, the Teens Inc. request on November 21st, but on your November meeting date, whenever that is, this would come back to you actually as an ordinance for action. That's the direction of me is if you're interested in continuing forward, we'll move forward with the ordinance.
So that's to change the use table
Correct.
only.
Correct.
Okay.
That's it. So I think, yes, I'm looking for with the SRU, absolutely. And so I think I'm looking for your nod of or to direct staff to work with Town Attorney Mattson to begin to draft that ordinance for a public hearing at your November meeting.
Okay.
Is that your nod?
I'll nod, wave.
Yeah, Jerry raising your hand. So, but for people in the room, so I guess how do you want to do this?
Well, you can just sort of raise your hand if you're nodding yes.
So for those of you online, we have hands raised by Commissioner Glasser, Commissioner Cornell, Chair Williams, Vice Chair Reese, which is 4.
You want to raise hands for a no nod?
Well,
I only need the 4, but I would guess Commissioner Duggan.
I want to say yes, but I don't understand how this use is going to be publicly owned. I understand how the land could maintain being publicly owned, but it says uses permitted in this zoning district must be publicly owned.
Right, so the land is publicly owned, and then there's a lease agreement for the facility.
I get that, but I guess my question is, it says, this is all it says, uses permitted in this zone district must be publicly owned. I get that the land is publicly owned, but we're talking about the use, the entity that's operating. I
So
think
it
those
says public areas which public and semi-public facilities and uses are located. Where?
I'm
that where
looking
you're-
at footnote 7 on the use table,
So footnote 7 would be specific to,
public zoning.
but
it
where is
says-
there it's wherever there's the yes and then the 7 or the R and then the 7.
Under
That
the,
footnote's going to be tied to a specific use type.
right, it says, where it says P for public, there's a 7 right next to it on the list of the various zoning districts at the top. There's CBD, GC, I, and P with a footnote 7. And I'm looking on the website, sorry, not the,
Yeah, so I guess as well, but that
Active.
footnote's going to be tied to one of these specific uses. You see where there's like a yes and then a 5? So I'm just trying to find where the 7 is.
It's across the top. It's across the top.
I don't see. I guess I'm not seeing it. Oh, I see what you're saying in the top of the use group table.
yeah, yep.
Yep.
7's at the very, very bottom.
So I don't know, Attorney Mattson, if you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, that could be part of the amendments in terms of what comes to the planning commission at the next meeting with the ordinance. Would be to amend that and also probably one thing to look at would be the description of the district categories and how public is defined in 1631.
So this is Chair Williams, Timmy, does that answer?
Yeah,
Your question?
I think in line with making this amendment, we would also amend footnote 7 to
I think you'd have to.
say that it doesn't have to be necessarily publicly owned. Right? Because I want to say yes, because it's like, it's a community benefit potentially, whether it's this or something else. But in a lot of those cases, it's not going to be publicly owned.
Question now?
Okay, just very quickly, because we need to wrap this up.
There it is. May Gerald, I just wanted to agree with Timmy because if the town is going to become a landlord and expand that role, you're going to be needing to take time to do the SRUs, and the contracts are going to have to be ironclad. Linda brought up some of the contract issues. This is going to take attorney time. There's a fiscal note attached. There's other issues involved, and I think we should really consider whether we want to be landlords at this point with our public land. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mike, did you?
I just wanted to clarify my absence of a nod was for very similar reasons to
Okay,
Timmy. I have no doubt that a child care facility would provide value to the community as Tings Inc. does. Sorry about the phone. But I haven't completely thought through the ramifications of introducing a private entity into the public zone.
well, this is Chair Williams. I guess my view is still that it comes, whatever we decide to do with the property, it comes to us as an SRU. So there is a safety net there, as Jim says, and it gives us more options as well. And so I mean, I don't see the negative here of doing this.
And certainly to move forward and then take next month meeting when we actually have more of a thought, actually have the ordinance in front of us,
That's
have
true.
some of these questions about the footnotes kind of figured out. We will be able to zero right in on that discussion next time. So not doing your nod now or for, and then actually making a vote to recommend a month from now is certainly much more important than, what we do right now tonight, as long as we're moving forward with the idea.
Right? All right, is that what you need, Miranda?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to discussion item 6.2, the municipal code additions for parking.
All right.
Can you want to introduce that?
Yes, so at your September meeting, we had brought forward kind of the request to start working on some municipal code language related to parking. And we worked on that with Vice Chair Reese and Commissioner Glasser, who have been a part of your parking crew, your parking subcommittee for quite a while now. Specifically, the directive that was given by the Board of Trustees is again another use group table amendment to really look at adding a new use, which is parking. And so we're looking at the use of parking being both just a standard parking lot and where can you build a parking lot, as well as where can you do paid parking. So what the subcommittee really recommends with town staff is that parking lots, including parking lots that would have paid parking operations, should be allowed use by right in neighborhood commercial, general commercial, central business, and public. We would also recommend, though, that they be allowed in residential zones that are located within the Downtown Development Authority District. So I put the DDA's current map in your packet, but unfortunately it doesn't read very well. So I included kind of an older map where the boundary is still the same, but you can see kind of where you might be looking at some residential lots. I think it's important to understand that in many ways, similar to your last discussion, the catalyst for this conversation was the rezone application for 101st Street. When the rezone application for 101st Street went before the Board of Trustees to move from high-density residential to central business district, one of the components of that was the applicant's desire to do parking, and the current code limited that applicant to only 20 spaces and also would not allow the applicant to do the commercial use of paid parking. So the Board of Trustees really felt like, well, we really need to add parking as a use altogether. The other side of this is the town of Nederland is also interested in doing paid parking and felt that it was only appropriate for the code to really specify where paid parking and parking operations are allowed. So that's the kind of the use group table that's before you. We also tried to work on just some kind of preliminary language about how to address paid parking in a very uniform way. What we don't want to see is that from parking lot to parking lot, whether it's public or private, that each entity is handling it differently. We really feel that it should be reserved just to kiosks and QR signs. We did not feel it was appropriate to regulate how someone would execute that. Like, we aren't going to say you can only use this certain vendor. You know, private entities should be allowed to decide what type of vendor they may want to partner with and how their enforcement looks, how much they charge. We just feel like we want to make sure that when you go from lot to lot, you know you're either doing a kiosk or you're doing a QR code to pay for the parking. So there's some preliminary draft language. We, of course, would need to work with Attorney Madsen to kind of fine tune that, but wanted to give you a sense of where we were working at. And really kind of the questions before you are twofold. How do you feel about the use group table, where again, parking in both a lot as well as paid parking is used by right in those commercial spaces and public, and then residential zones in the DDA district? And then the second is how do you feel about kind of the preliminary ordinance language we've presented to you?
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Again, this is a discussion item. Anyone have any questions? We'll open it up to the public. Or does the subcommittee want to add anything to that?
I just wanted to, this is
Jim
Jim
Reese.
Reese, yes. I just wanted to, for a little context, say there's an interest, I believe, of this coming from the BOT. They're motivated for this to happen and right soon, like in 2024.
Yes, so the Board of Trustees is interested. So actually, the Board of Trustees budgeted for paid parking in 2023. When we went to go implement it, we wanted to wait until the visitor center parking lot was paved. And so really financially didn't make sense for us to start on First Street. Our intention is to do First Street and the visitor center. So once the visitor center parking lot became paved, Attorney Madsen really noted that, you know, it would be appropriate for the code to have this as a use, because we've had other people run through special review uses for paid parking. So it doesn't seem appropriate for town to just do it. It really should be identified as its own use. And then staff, we really felt like there needed to be that uniform language in how paid parking would work. And so that's how both of these came together. The Board of Trustees does intend, currently it appears, to continue their paid parking endeavors as a part of their 2024 budget. And so the hope is that this ordinance could be approved and implemented early next year so that the town can start on paid parking.
And I just, this is Jim Reese again. I wanted to say, my education, a lot of people have a lot of questions. They're going to hear this and they're going to have all the concerns. I want to talk, again, we have to focus on what we're talking about tonight, which is not residential passes and all the different things that are going to be worked out later. All we're talking about is allowing this for owners in the central business district on their own private property, since the town's planning on doing it anyway, and standardizing the method by which people will have to, you know, the interface that they'll do to pay for the parking, which I think is a great idea, because I hate QR codes. I wouldn't want to have to learn 6 different ways, you know, at 6 different parking lots to do it, you know. And so, you know, it took me 10 minutes the first time I went to Idaho Springs to figure it out. But now that I know, every time I go down there, I got it. It's fine. So, you know, we're focused on tonight is just, again, allowing this as a use for people already in the central business district on private property, and to standardize it as I understand it.
Correct. And what I would say is what we aren't, you will see there, we're recommending this being used by right. And the reason for that is because there's an ordinance that is tied to paid parking that will regulate how paid parking occurs. And so we didn't feel that an SRU was necessary if you're going to have a code that dictates, you know, the implementation of paid parking. So that is why it's currently being proposed to you as a use by right, and no special review use.
Okay, Roger, do you want to comment?
Yeah, Cornell speaking. I think you made your statement that it was limited to the amount of parking in central business district.
So it's central business district, neighborhood commercial, general commercial, and public. And then
I
when
mean, right now, there, you can have paid parking in,
right now, we consider that to be other commercial activity, which requires a special review use.
under a special review, you could have a paid lot right now.
Correct. And so
So
we,
you said it was limited to 20 spaces.
well,
in the
so,
presentation.
but that's two different things. So
I
you
know,
can
so
allow.
you can have it right now under special review.
Correct, and you can also have a parking lot up to 20 spaces without a special review use.
If you say so, okay. So that, I just wanted to know that it could happen. My question is, so the idea that businesses that have to provide, so they have X amount of tables, X amount of square feet, this has nothing to do with that. That is still in effect. We have not touched that idea of required parking by businesses at all.
Well, so in the central business district, there's currently a moratorium on the parking count, but yes.
Previously, there had been.
Yeah, and I guess one thing, maybe.
Okay, in general commercial, that still stands.
Correct. And perhaps I know this question came up in our subcommittee. So is standard parking lot size. Like you can't, all of a sudden then just build a bunch of really tiny spaces and charge for them. You still have to meet standard parking regulations, model traffic code and those things. And so you still have to build your lot. So if your lot only allows for 10 spaces, you can't try to squeeze in 14. You still are going to have to keep to however many spaces you can feasibly build in compliance with code.
No, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that this is totally separate from the parking standard that we have, that all businesses have to adhere to, other than there's a moratorium right now.
Correct.
But certainly in general commercial, that nothing changes with the requirements to provide parking.
Correct. Yeah. So this is just an opportunity to create a use though, where rather than having a business, if you wanted to build just a parking lot on a parcel, this is a use. This officially becomes a use to have a parking lot. And then it also gives you the opportunity to then choose to have paid parking on that lot if the owner so chooses.
Got it. I understand. That helps. Just wanted, really, my question was just to make sure that the old wasn't totally going away. The old standard parking that's requirement to provide parking for your
Right.
businesses.
So all this would be an amendment to the use group table and then an addition to chapter 11, which is streets, sidewalks and public places, that would then add in the paid parking language. Those are the only two really changes that are being asked. So absolutely to Commissioner Cornell's point, this does not change all of that language regarding how parking is calculated and the number of parking spaces necessary for a business or residential.
Okay, any other questions at this point? No. Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. Does anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Any hands raised? Okay, we'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the commission. It's a discussion item, so if you want to weigh in or.
And maybe I can just add that the next steps, similar to your last one, would be if there's interest in continuing forward, we would draft an ordinance with Attorney Madsen. And this is a chapter 16 change again, so another public hearing before the Planning Commission.
Next month.
Correct. If you direct us, if we get the nod of 4 to continue forward, we would bring it to you next month.
Well, anyone opposed to doing that? I mean, we'll have another chance to look at it and check the language.
Yeah, I'll wait until I see the ordinance before I vote no on it. Well,
That's open-minded.
Yeah, keep that.
I would see the ordinance because I just questioned how this will work because like you say, we had to form a moratorium in central business district and although you might end up seeing a paid parking lot going there as a business, and it almost almost should have been that all along we should have been working to, use that lot or that space to make the required parking, but we'll just see how it plays out. I'm totally okay with moving forward and seeing how it plays out.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the parking subcommittee's done an awful lot of work on this, and Jim, you've done a lot of work even prior to this, so it's be nice to see something move forward. So,
And it certainly changed things when there was a moratorium in Central Business District, which was the area that was
right.
the hard nut to crack.
Okay, shall we do a nod?
Are you gonna raise hands again so I can
Ra-
tell those
yeah,
online?
Raise hands for
So-
moving forward.
Those who are raising their hands are Commissioner Glasser, Chair Williams, Vice Chair Reese, Commissioner Duggan, and Commissioner Dye.
Okay. Thank you. Right, we're on a roll here.
We're just on a use group table journey together.
So we may slow down a little bit, but we'll move ahead here.
Okay.
So we'll move on to discussion item 6.3, the housing needs assessment. This is the use group table amendments.
Yes, so just for a little clarification, I thought after, I was not at your last meeting, but I had the pleasure of watching it. And I just thought that might be helpful to break these into 4 separate conversations. They're 4 separate ordinances that we start to talk about them, just to provide a little structure. So we all had a wonderful work session, in my opinion, just last week, where we had an opportunity to talk about the use group table for residential uses. So just for kind of background, when we brought this to you in September, our recommendation was to break the use group for residential out of the current use group table, where it clusters all residential zones, and allow each residential zone to be broken out on its own. And when we met at the work session, we operated off of a blank slate. We brought you just a blank use group table, and we kind of just went back through and started filling things in. And in many ways, the use group table that's being proposed stays the same. I did send you a better version of the use group table for you to review, where we've kept things exactly how they are and haven't changed anything to be used by right, but rather opened up the opportunity to have more of the special review use conversations. And so I'll just kind of quickly review some of these changes, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that those online can see what I'm seeing. So single family residential dwelling units, we had determined there was no need for change. Leave it as is. What we did discuss, though, is that removing where it was currently read multifamily units up to 4 dwelling units, we agreed to break those out by type so that it's clear and clean for a developer to understand, okay, here's where I can build a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex. There were no changes to multifamily dwelling units exceeding 4 units. Also, no changes to mobile home. But we talked about for family care homes, nursing homes, and retirement homes, that we were open to allowing them more in residential zones under special review use and maybe less in the commercial spaces. And so you see those changes for both family care home, nursing home, and retirement home. No changes to accessory dwelling units. There's the addition of duplex, triplex, and fourplex, but again, the use group table doesn't change because it was always allowed use by right in all those residential zones. We just broke them out. What we did add, though, is that in publicly zoned spaces, we could consider those, again, through that public-private partnership, that under special review use, mixed use, duplex, triplex, fourplex could be allowed under a special review use in order to, again, open that use type and conversation up. And then the biggest thing was consideration of adding in a tiny home village, which would be special review use in all residential zones, neighborhood, commercial, and public. So really the question is, first, did I capture our conversation correctly? Is there anything that felt shocking based on our work session to what we put here? And then seeing it in this format, how are you feeling? Are there any questions, concerns, additional considerations? And then ultimately, we're looking for direction from you. Do you feel like we're in a space where we could go draft the ordinance and bring this back as a public hearing in November?
Thank you, Miranda. So, quick question. We got footnotes that aren't on your table, but those are in the, or we just.
Yeah, sorry, I was moving kind of fast last night. So you have another ordinance that has the footnotes. And I'm happy to review some of those footnotes if needed, but what's in your packet, the proposed ordinance change language has the footnotes still in it.
Number 10.
Yeah, so if you look at what I put in your packet, not this attachment I sent you last night, that has the footnotes still.
The one that,
The one that was in the original packet, not my late night edition.
well, Roger Cornell speaking. So the two biggest issues I have again was the changing, and just to emphasize that, the single family dwelling, the multifamily dwelling units, that says R3, all those ones that we are still consistently speaking that, a duplex or multifamily dwelling unit will follow the yard and bulk of 1633 yard and bulk and meets the requirements of 1633 minimum lot area per lot per dwelling unit square foot. So that's clear, the
Yeah,
discussion.
that is clear that all of these would still have to meet a yard and bulk requirements. It's just allowing, I think the term, I really like the commissioner, it's just allowing that consideration, especially more in the public zones for triplex, quadplex, or fourplex, duplex, is we're saying we'll consider this under a SRU if town could do a public-private partnership or develop its own triplex on a publicly zoned lot, that would be considered under SRU. But again, has to meet all yard and bulk requirements.
Okay, I've just clarified that. So that was the only issue that we kind of got a little on a tangent. And well, because there's actually a history, as everybody knows, that, how we actually came at this call that the multifamily, because we were trying to streamline the whole, kind of what we're doing right now. It was a couple of years ago where everything, a duplex on up, 2 and up, was special review. So we empowered staff to, do 4 units or less. Then it's just done just through the building department, code review, all those things. So that's why we did it. But there has been 1 or 2 cases in the history of where, because it's special review, holding hearing, there actually had been some projects go forward and they had a hearing, but people totally forgot that, you have to have yard and bulk. And there are a couple of really small duplexes that were created, mostly in Old Town, because that's where it was likely to happen. So that's my issue of clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roger. Any other comments?
Well, then I do have the one. I wrote,
Well,
sorry,
but just one?
for me, the elephant in the room was the final one, tiny house, which I sent you all a memo that, I just want everybody to please understand that that's a very, very big step forward to take, because just as I just described, if you're in a zone, say, let's just say HDR, and you wanted to do a triplex, you would actually need to have a lot that's 12,000 square feet. If you want to do tiny homes, you're now going to be able to do three units, a triplex, whatever you want to call it, 3 separate units in a 4,000 square foot lot. And it's that same thing all the way up, just escalate all the way up, be about 12, somewhere between 12 and possibly 14 units in mountain residential. So,
And maybe I could just add that we definitely, and that's, I think, the reason why it was special review use and no tiny home village was used by right, for that exact reason, that an applicant could come forward and say, I'm looking to build 8 units on this lot, and then you can really look at the impact of that. That was just a hypothetical. You could look at the impact of that and say, this is to meet the characteristic of the neighborhood and some of those different evaluating criteria that really three, that three is more appropriate, or that none of this, we felt like because of how new tiny home villages were, that allowing it through special review, again, opens up that conversation, and maybe it becomes like duplex, triplex, where later you're ready to make use by right, but for now, allowing it to be special review use, to have those conversations. And again, I guess the reason that this is, I think, still being asked to be pursued is we're looking at alternative housing. It's not just about affordable, but we need asking that the town become kind of creative in your different housing types, and tiny homes are definitely a new consideration. There are, of course, recognition that current code does require separate taps, and we do understand that if you're going to do 4 separate tiny homes, that's very expensive. So there are later components, but are asking for consideration to allow this to continue forward because all of it is SRU and none is used by right.
All right. So if I could finish. So the issue, it's very, very clear. On one hand, here you are in HDR or whatever zone it is, and you have very specific yard and bulks. And I understand the ask. It's a huge ask then to be living in a neighborhood, and whether it's special review or whatever, it's just the idea that it's not the idea that the review could start for this leap forward. Where right now, someone would come in to say mountain residential, you would not be allowed to put up a triplex. Well, it's very, very, or a fourplex. So it's a very, very fine line between what is the difference between a fourplex and a 4 tiny house village. I would certainly argue that this town actually should step forward. So that's not sustainable. The building issues, the heat, 4 different furnaces, and really a fourplex that has 800 square foot units, 4 800 square foot units, is actually kind of a large building. I'm not a large building. That's a large unit to have an 800 square foot residence. I just had dinner with my daughter, and their house is 675 feet. And if you look down in Boulder, Longmont, half of America before 1960, having a 800 square foot house was considered a big house. So all, as I wrote that email and asked, was that this table does work, but I'm only asked that we would actually hold out on a tiny house village, because there's immense questions asked, and I'm not actually saying right yes or no, but it's a huge leap, and it's a huge discussion that we need to have separate from these other issues, so that we can just focus on that one issue. So that's, I have not, it's been a long, long time since I actually felt that I should actually, push an idea and write an email to everybody, but I felt that to discuss this a little bit is very, very important, because there are a lot of issues to go forward. And that's not just a small thing, like the idea that, oh, let's do, a fourplex by staff and not by review. I mean, this is saying, what change to a neighborhood, in Hilltop right here, right across the street here, to actually have 8, 9, 10 little homes been put in there right next to home. That's a huge ask. That's a huge discussion. So I just ask that we at least, move forward with the top part and leave that out for right now. That's my ask.
But Roger, why wouldn't the tiny house village be subject to the same yard and bulk as far as minimum?
Because it's not. Because that's that's the design of what it is. Well, I'll let the administrator. That doesn't fall under the.
So there is no note in here that would change. So as I just previously said, there's no note in here that we're changing yard and bulk standards for any of these uses. That's what we agreed upon at our work session, that no yard and bulk changes would be tied to this.
I agree, but the tiny house village, you're making, you're asking 3, 4, 5, 6 dwelling units in that space.
If it meets yard and bulk.
Correct.
Only if the lot's big enough.
Well,
Only if the lot's big enough. Right. It's a little, I mean, it's a little outside the box thinking.
Village.
Well, it may not be a village.
Right. May not be.
Then I'm sorry, okay.
So I also would say that the term village is not something, this is Jim Race, is something that I would take off there because that wasn't what we talked about. We talked about, I would just say small home, tiny, we decided on tiny home. And that was going to be from 100 to 800 square feet. And I think the term village kind of lets people think, oh my gosh, there's going to be 8, 10, 12 units that are going to pop up here, but it's all dependent upon the available square footage of the lot.
Right. I think the reason is that ideally someone who wants to build tiny homes are doing multiple tiny homes because their lot can allow for it, which is where the village term came from. And the definition talks about 3 small structures or more.
It's sort of like detached multifamily would be another
Okay.
way to name that category, right?
Well, you made me lose a whole night of sleep, you guys.
All and ask somebody.
Well, no, because the entire discussion of tiny home, that's what it was all about. And that's why this is exactly where our workshop was 8 years ago when we discussed this, is that we have no problem with the tiny home as long as, 1 house per dwelling unit
So I think in many ways though.
or 1 dwelling unit per lot. Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry. Some of the reason why we wanted to kind of call this out is this just makes it clear for a developer who's like, I'm really interested in tiny homes. They can see it clearly. Sure, we allow it, but we want to talk to you about it. They're all special review use. Nothing's allowed use by right. Oh, it's clear. I can quickly see, I can build a triplex. Like we wanted to pull it out so that it's clear to a developer who's wanting to look at our use group table, really what they can and cannot do. And this is just one example where happy to take up the village. But that, yes, we're happy to consider tiny homes and maybe multiple tiny homes if you meet yard and bulk, but we still want the special review use to go with it.
So I don't like.
And that we're not going to greenlight anything because it's such a new use. I think it's a great opportunity to evaluate, is this appropriate for us under a special review? But this allows us to say, absolutely, we're open to talking through tiny homes.
One example would be the Wingate property that's 2.7 acres. It's low density. You need 16,000 square foot per unit. So you could build a tiny home village of whatever that math is, 8 units
If the land was flat.
on an abnormally large for the zoning lot.
But wouldn't that then fall under PUD?
I don't know.
I think it would.
Because
That's
the number
more
of
than
units.
4.
Yeah.
No, you don't, you can request a PUD if you make the lots. It would just be a subdivision if you made the lots to be like
Well,
a
if they're
subdivision.
individual units, individually.
No, it's
owned.
not a PUD. That doesn't kick in a PUD.
They
It could just be a
they wouldn't be
subdivision.
separate parcels of land. It would be 3 or 4 or 8.
Unless they took that parcel.
Yeah, we don't even need to go there. We don't even actually necessarily whether it be that. Just, so in all situations, the yard and bulk will be held. So that's all I need.
Correct.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and I
Sorry.
apologize for my misunderstanding. But it's
Sorry,
because traditionally, that's what the tiny homes were. And that's why,
Right. And I guess our thought is like through the special review use, maybe a couple years from now, we start to talk about maybe some yard and bulk changes, but that's not what we're asking. We're asking to open up alternative housing opportunities that we can explore with developers should they ever be interested. And maybe they're not. Maybe this is too restrictive because you have to stick with yard and bulk and they're not interested.
Yeah, I
But it opens up the conversation and I think it's showing many developers that we're interested in alternative housing opportunities and tiny homes or small structures from 100 to 800 or 600 square feet. 8, thank you, is what we had decided is things we'd like to talk about. And then the second part of that is, of course, dealing with the water. That's a lot of structures and a lot of money, and that comes under the rate study. But then this is kind of already in the code. So when the rate study comes, we can really start to talk with the developers. If it's, say, 1 tap fee to feed 4 structures, because they're all tiny homes, a developer may be very interested in that type of, that opportunity versus maybe a large 4-plex that requires a 3-inch tap. I mean, that's still very expensive, where if we can go a 1 inch or a 3/4 to feed multiple structures, it may be in a developer's interest to want to consider something like tiny homes.
Okay. Well, did you have a
Yeah,
comment?
yeah, I had one more. This is Jim Rice. I feel like, you know, this is one step on the long journey to try and address those, you know, online that weren't, and people who might not have been at the work session. What, you know, it kept being brought up. We're 122 housing units short for the amount of people that we need housing in this town currently. And we're looking at opportunities that it's not going to get solved. There's not going to be a tiny home village pop up next door to anybody. I think the term village probably would scare some people. You might put 3 or more in there in parentheses instead. And then again, special review use. I have faith in you, Roger. I do. I have faith that you're going to drill down when this comes before us and you're going to look at every little thing. We're all going to look at it. We're all going to examine it. It's all going to go before public comment and it's going to get beat to death before anything ever gets decided and agreed upon, you know. So I come back to, if you tell me you're going to attach a special review use to it, I'm willing to say, yes, let's make that step on the journey to try and create additional housing in our town, because we're going to have lots of opportunity to review it in the future.
And that's right. Yeah, thank you. I'd really just like to reiterate, none of the changes that we did changed something to be used by right. Everything had a special review so that we could discuss it. And then similar to the journey that the multifamily up to 4 dwelling units went on, there may be a time where we're like, all right, the SRUs aren't needed. We've done our due diligence and we're ready to move this to use by right. And so again, I think a lot of the changes, also just really be mindful, we didn't talk a ton in the public. So, but we did change mixed use, duplex, triplex, fourplex, and of course, tiny homes to be special review use to allow town to either develop its own housing or to partner to develop housing. Which will be very important under Prop 123, where the town committed to develop or permitting 123 affordable units. We need to allow the space in the use group table for them to actually do that. I'm sorry,
No.
13 units under Prop 123.
Okay.
Not that 123 units wouldn't be incredible, but it was 13 units.
Okay. Does anyone have any other further questions on this item? I mean,
Can I just also just remind everyone that just that mixed use on the table I sent you last night didn't have the footnoter. That R, the 11 would be a new footnote, which would allow mixed use in residential zones that were, I have to find my exact note that I wrote, unless somebody has it immediately in front. Sorry, switching
Go ahead.
gears.
Please go ahead.
mixed use is only allowed in the downtown corridor, which includes First Street, Second Street, Third Street, East Street, and Snyder Street.
Yeah, so talking to Attorney Madsen, we really can't say the CBD, doesn't quite work. So we basically identified the streets to narrow it in that it's just that corridor right there that could
Just
have
right-
mixed use in the
right around there.
downtown, but we don't have a downtown as a zone, so we structured it by the streets.
Okay.
In a residential zone. Under special review.
Okay, so this would be similar. This would then, if we nod yes, this would go forth for Attorney Madsen to come up with the language and we would see it next month
Correct.
that quickly.
That's our goal. You know, the hope is that also, you know, while it wouldn't be necessarily adopted and implemented before the end of the year, it would be included in the housing needs assessment that these were the 4 strategies the town adopted, just implementation dates might vary slightly.
Okay, barring any other further comment, shall we do a nod? I like these nods. Eh? Okay, to
Okay,
move forward.
all commissioners raise their hand. Mayor Pro Tem doesn't vote, so Mayor Pro Tem did not. I would say not by lack of support, I hope.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks, by the way, for the workshop. That really was helpful to straighten this out, because when you weren't here the last meeting, we We were chasing our tails.
I watched. It was,
You watched.
I
Okay.
watched. But thank you all. I really
Was-
appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Was it as ugly on tape as it was in person?
There were moments where I was like, I just wish I was there. I really appreciate that you taking the time to dive further into it. I think it came across a bit more complex than we were intending. So,
Yeah. Okay, well, it's complicated, so.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to go ahead and see if we can do the fourth discussion item and then take a break before we get to our action items. So the next,
Chair Williams, public
Yes.
comment. Thank you, Attorney
oh,
Madsen.
oh, good point, sorry. Do we have any public comment?
Maybe you did that. I can't remember.
Okay. Thank you, thanks for the reminder.
Thanks, Attorney Madsen.
Okay, so we'll move on to housing needs assessment, affordable housing yard and bulk variance.
Okay, so as just a kind of a recap from this came out of a bit of our work session too. We understand when this was originally presented, there was, talk about AMI and what percentages and how much of your home was going to be deed restricted. To Vice Chair Reese's point, we're just trying to slightly move the needle. So as town staff, we really revisited what makes sense here. And because the town has adopted Proposition 123, which is affordable housing, what we'd like to see is that there's an ability for a developer to seek yard and bulk, a variance for yard and bulk, if their property is 100% deed restricted as affordable housing. So here's how the process would work. For 20 years, if the structure was 100% deed restricted, that means if it's a fourplex, it's the whole thing. They could meet with town staff to talk about an up to 50% variance for their structure. And that would be for all yard and bulk except for maximum lot size and height. We will not allow any administrative variances for height, and maximum lot size variance would only be 15%. Minimum, right, minimum. So the point of meeting with staff first is that we're going to evaluate what's the minimum relief needed for your structure. We don't want to just green light that you automatically need a 50% variance when you may only need a 20% variance. So there's a kind of conversation between town staff and the developer. Once those final numbers have been decided on, we felt it was appropriate for it to go before the Board of Zoning Adjustment for final decision and final vote. The reason for that is it allows the public hearing. We'll publicly notice it. Neighbors within 300 feet will receive the notice, goes in the newspaper, and then the property gets noticed. The BZA will really take two of their evaluating criteria, which is, would this alter the essential characteristic of the neighborhood? And is it the minimum variance needed for that relief? We are asking that the BZA would have that hearing without delay. So as soon as the town staff and developer agreed to their numbers, there would be a hearing set within 30 days, and there would be no fee to the developer to go before the BZA. Really just feel like this is a great opportunity for town to engage developers to work on affordable housing since Prop 123 alone allows us to do affordable housing. This gives that space for a developer to come forward and maybe modify their yard in bulk. At our work session, we talked a little bit about what does it mean to meet that, characteristic of the neighborhood. Still a little bit more work to do that, but some of the things we researched is really talking about, the physical aspects of the neighborhood, the infrastructure capacity, the existing uses within the neighborhood, future development opportunities, or what are their kind of open space uses. We'll also have some clear guidelines and definitions on what is affordable, what is deed restricted, what's attainable. But ultimately, before you, same conversation, looking for if there's the not a 4 to bring this back to you as an ordinance for public hearing and approval. And really question is, do you have any concerns? Did I capture our conversation again accurately? Is there anything that felt different to what we talked about? And then happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. So first question, we didn't get to it in the work session, but any reason why it shouldn't come back to the Planning Commission as opposed to BZA? And the reason I say that is because, it could affect the whole planning of the town, and it seems like that might, not that we're looking for more work, but I'm just wondering if that's a better way to go.
I think we stuck with the BZA because they're the ones who typically do variances for yard and bulk. I might call Attorney Madsen into this if she had any maybe legal thoughts about what is the appropriate board for variances to yard and bulk.
It could be the planning commission. It does not have to be the BZA. That's really would be ultimately a decision for the Board of Trustees to decide who would be the ultimate authority. The BZA, when they do make decisions, their decisions are binding. And typically with the planning commission makes recommendations to the Board of Trustees. So I guess you'd also want to think about that process as well.
Yeah, that's Chair Williams again. Yes, and the reason I was thinking the PC, because that then that has an extra step as opposed to just the final say of the BZA without us not having any input. I don't know how others feel about this, but that was my thought when reading through this. Roger?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. This is Roger Cornell. I agree with you 100%, Steve. The thoughts I've had is because the BZA is set up and they are looking at like one little criteria. Is there pile of, a steep slope? Is there a great big boulder that you can't meet setbacks? Did the town plat the road too close to your front yard that you can't get the 30 feet setback? You need a variance. You need easements to build, but they're looking at one criteria at a time. And then when they say, yeah, we'll get that variance, it's done. It goes straight to it goes to the builder. The only way to challenge it is to actually through the courts. And then what I feel like in our abstract here is that we've actually, said, well, they will have the evaluating criteria and let's look at, and you kind of added some criteria that is not in the BZA's in our code in 232 under the BZA standards. But what these are exactly the criteria that we should be looking at under a special review if it was the planning commission. So I feel, yes, it's not really a variance, but I would say that the whole project and having a person coming forward, yes, he is asking for a variance, but it's the whole idea of what can give and take on what a project will be, how it'll look, and what we can do to make it be affordable and make that work. So it's not really a variance in a strict sense that, I can't reasonably build this house 30 feet from the property line. I need to build it 25 feet away. It's totally looking at an entire package of development. So, and then with the idea that look at all these aspects that we would be looking at, which are exactly the same questions that we'll find out under special review that we should be looking at and asking of a developer. So I think 100% it belongs in planning commission and under special review, just as we 5 minutes ago said the tiny village will be reviewed. Well, this is a good example of something that very definitely needs to be reviewed. Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, this is Jim Reese. First off, I just want a little clarification because as I'm reading through this, I thought as we were discussing it, that there was going to be a 15% available variance approval by administrative. Am I conflating a couple of things here? And then this says 50% for all bold and all the yard and bulk requirements. And then it follows it up with up to 15% maximum lot size variance would be allowed, no height variance allowed. And so I'm a little confused. Can you kind of help us?
Yeah, so that's a separate ordinance, that there was going to be allowed up to 15% variance on all yard and bulk except for height for any development. And this is allowing someone to go up to 50% for an affordable housing development.
Then what does
So
the follow-on line here mean where it says then up to 15% maximum lot size variance would be allowed right after it says a 50%?
Right, so it's 50% on all yard and bulk except for maximum lot size, which would only be allowed an up to 15% variance.
Okay.
That was based on feedback from Commissioner Duggan, that a 50% variance on maximum lot size felt to be too much. So that's the only one that's different.
Sorry again, but minimum, right? I just want to be clear, minimum lot size.
Minimum lot size, yes, thank you, yes.
That's important.
That is important.
Yeah, like 15%.
Yes.
That's the difference between having one extra unit or not.
Right, yeah, it would.
It's fine when we're talking about deed restricted affordable housing.
So an example would be, so if you're looking at medium density residential, you had have, so right now the minimum lot area is 8,000, you could maybe go up to 9,200 with a 15%, where 50% would allow you to go up to much larger.
And Steve, I mean, I'm sorry, but Jim, the one I use, the 15%, which yes, why, I think for a month we've been going back and forth, confusing them. The 15% was across the board, was to be just administratively that they could handle it up to that 15% variance administratively. And that's, we were just trying to streamline
Right.
the things.
And we're saying,
For the two differences.
yeah, sorry, we're saying that for affordable, you can go even higher except for the minimum lot size. There's no, it's really only administrative variance that would even be allowed there. But if you're looking to change, say your setback, you'd like to go from, 10 or 20 for a setback from the street, you want to go from 20 to 10. That's a conversation we can have. That ultimately it would have to be approved by, it sounds like maybe the planning commission would have to basically vote to approve the recommendation between town staff and the developer. My only ask is that it's still without delay and that it's still free to the developer because we want to remove as many barriers as we can for affordable developers.
So this is Jim Reese again. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead, Linda.
Question on when there is a variance granted and it would be a fourplex, just hypothetically, is the parking, off-street parking considered in that variance?
Yeah, so they would still have to meet off-street parking
They'd have
code.
to
That's
meet
not
all those
changing.
requirements.
Correct.
Does the zoning, the zoning board, do they consider that when they do? Or is it the planning commission that would look into that?
So when I don't want to speak to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. I mean, I guess they may consider it depending on the variance, but some of their variances, a lot of the variances that come before them are going to indicate where their driveway is and where their parking is, and they're looking for again, minimum relief from typically a side setback.
Okay, yeah.
I guess I do understand what you're saying is that perhaps a special review use is the better format for this to evaluate other criteria than to just the variance. I think for staff, we just want to remove as many barriers as we can. And so I think.
But we also don't want things to fall through the cracks either.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so I think that's where it's without delay, without a fee, without a financial hardship. But yes,
Problem with that.
if you're really interested in your 50%, up to 50% setback changes, variances, you do have to go through the special review use process. I'm very comfortable we just want to give opportunities, and this is not where nothing gets green lighted, nothing's administrative when it comes to these affordable units, but it gives opportunities that then are discussed on a larger platform.
So this is Chair Williams again. I'm confused. You said the 15% this is a separate ordinance?
The 15% altogether for all developments is a separate ordinance. The reason that this isn't 50% for minimum lot size is because Commissioner Duggan had expressed concern about how much that would really change the impact of a
Okay,
community.
so, because it's mentioned in this aim, that's.
Correct. That's just the one criteria on the yard and bulk table that would not be allowed an up to 50%
Okay.
variance.
Maybe we should make it 14%, so there's no confusion.
Happy whichever one to
Or
direct.
16%, I don't care.
Fair.
Eliminate that confusion, right?
Yeah, the other one is 7.2, the action item.
Well, but here's what I guess I would say is that if an affordable housing developer came and said, I don't need any variance to yard and bulk except for a 15% minimum lot size, that would be done administratively.
Right.
It's not coming to you all because it's allowed under the other ordinance. But if they're saying, I want my 15% minimum lot size plus my 50% on all of my side yard setbacks, that's going to come to you all.
Okay. All right.
This is Commissioner Race. So just to clarify further this money situation. So right now, as we're looking at it, the recommendation is it would be administrative review followed by BZA review. And what we're talking about right now is changing that to come before the Planning Commission as an SRU.
I guess I'd like to talk to Attorney Madsen a little bit more about that because I think we need to really assess, like, do all the SRU requirements really make sense here? Because we're just talking setback variances where your SRU gets into things like, where's your trash area? Where's your signage? Like, that's not, I don't really want affordable developers to have to go through this whole process when all they're seeking is to go from 20 to 10. So I guess I'm hesitant to want to call it an SRU, and Attorney Madsen tell me if I'm totally off base here. I'm hesitant to want to call it an SRU, but perhaps it's some form of a variance process that comes before the BZA that just has, or excuse me, the Planning Commission that has kind of very specific evaluating criteria that's more talks about adjacent land uses and keeping with the characteristic of the neighborhood.
That's truly.
Right.
Is that
Well,
something that's doable, Attorney Madsen, to do it more of just like not an SRU, but create a variance process within the Planning Commission?
Right. No, definitely that's the right line of thinking, Miranda, is that what is the criteria that you want to be evaluating
Right.
an application for variance or adjustment of yard and bulk requirements for these affordable projects? Is it the SRU criteria or is it more aligned to the variance criteria that's outlined in the BZA chapter?
or could it be a subset of those requirements?
Yeah, I guess I just, here would be my concern is like, then there's no if a affordable developer could build non-affordable housing, use by right, what's the incentive to now be affordable and then have to go through all the components of providing you their site plan and their drawings and where are they parking and what's their lighting and what's their trash plan? No developer is going to go through that. It's not worth it. And so I'm hesitant to want to use the SRU criteria. I'm more interested in bringing back to you variance criteria that's very specific to the characteristic of the neighborhood, because I think you've taken away the entire incentive of affordable housing development if they have to come with all of the criteria in an SRU, or even a large chunk of the criteria.
But don't they have, Cornell again, an awful lot of the stuff you just mentioned, they actually have to do that at the building department.
Correct. And that's where it should stay with administration in our
I
opinion.
understand, but they have all this stuff prepared, so, they come here and make a 20-minute presentation. But I think more in line is the stuff that the bullets that you outlined and targeted about the neighborhood, the impact. I mean, there's certainly, and those are not in the BZA at this time too, so you certainly could make an abbreviated,
Variance.
bullets for just a variance review, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I guess where I view a special review use is you really need to have your site plan all developed out, where a builder could be looking at an empty lot, wanting to know that they can adjust their setbacks and then start to design it. Whereas if you do SRU, they need to come design it first. And I just think that's not realistic in what we're saying. And so I'd rather see them have just kind of a shortened variance criteria so we can say, sure, you can modify your lot setbacks and now go to design, and administratively with the building department, we'll work out your lighting, your egress, your trash, your parking, as we do with every other development.
This is Commissioner Reese. So again, it sounds like you're saying, okay, we're trying to, this, the overarching goal here is to make it more attractive for a developer to try and come and not have to spend a lot of time and money going through which is why you wanted as much as possible for it to be administrative. And then the BZA would have been a quicker response, and we trust our staff to do, to look out and follow the code and make sure that everything is done. And so first off, I wonder what your opinion is on if we then change it. Secondly, I hate making extra work for you, come up with this new process, but okay, we come up with this other process, not an SRU that's abbreviated that we would look at instead of the BZA. Does that still meet the goal of removing barriers in your mind to incentivize somebody to come and try these affordable housing units?
Yes. I mean, to me, I'm fine whether it's the BZA or the PC. I think my ask is that we come back to you with very specific variance criteria and not all the components of the SRU that really we're looking at, if anything in the SRU, talking about the adjacent land uses, the size of the site, the building location. So A, B, and C. And does this meet the characteristics of the neighborhood? It's really, those are like just their 3 evaluated criteria.
Right. So, Mr. Chair Williams, so either way, Jim, we still have to come up with the criteria, whether it goes to the planning commission or BZA
Yeah.
is really
Yeah, there's no,
probably a moot point or immaterial because the work is the same.
Attorney Madsen, though, can the planning commission, I guess what I would like to avoid though is that a planning commission having to go to the BOT. That's like yet another step as staff, I think we're not interested in. Does the planning commission, could it be that they have the authority to make that vote and it stay there and not have to carry on to the BOT?
Yeah, definitely. The planning commission can be the final decision maker, if that's what's decided. It could be a one-step process.
That's what I would prefer, is if we say, yes, you've agreed to something with staff, but you need to go have it approved by the planning commission, that it's not like, and the board of trustees, and you'll have this done in 3 months from now. We'd like you make your agreement and 30 days later, you've got your hearing. But I think that's a question before the planning commission. If for some odd reason your meeting doesn't fall within the 30 days or it's too close to when we agree, then you as a planning commission are agreeing to a special meeting for this specific development, where at the BZA, we kind of call it when the applications show up. So they're very used to just kind of those last minute, hey, we're about to have a meeting. Where this group would have to, in essence, my ask would be that the planning commission is agreeing that in these probably relatively rare, but in these circumstances, you're going to agree to a special potentially if your regular meeting date doesn't align appropriately. Because I think the biggest thing for a staff is without delay. That language is important to us.
I actually think the planning commission's record of attendance and making it to meetings and making decisions is a bit above. We've had some time filling the BZA and making that work. So I think our record stands for itself.
So that language then would go into the ordinance, is that correct? To say that this is the final stop and it's within 30 days and a special meeting could be called?
Yes.
All of that goes into the ordinance that Attorney Madsen would draft?
Correct.
Well, is the planning commission comfortable with that?
This is Commissioner Reese. I am, and I appreciate you helping walk us through that, because even though we had the workshop, this actually, now I have a good understanding of that. And I would agree that the Planning Commission is a better forum for looking at that and review. I think that we, or at least I, I'll speak for myself. I think everybody here though does their homework and digs in and looks at the process well. I can't see us ever then canceling a meeting on a month when there's a pending action.
Right.
So I don't think that there's going to be an issue. It would just be the odd thing that we have a weird number of weeks or something like that, but it's extreme rarity that we'd have to have a special meeting.
Yeah, I guess my only, it would be the public noticing side. Like if we agreed and then you were set to meet the next week, we're going to need the 15 days. So you would then have to look to have a special.
Slide a meeting a week or something like that.
Yeah, again, I don't view this as like developers are not knocking on our door, although they're welcome, but they're not knocking on our door now to build these. So I don't think it's going to happen often, but we would like that without delay language.
Okay.
Don't forget public comment. But
Yes, so I'm going to ready to do that. So let's open it up for public comment. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, having heard none, we'll close public comment and we will go to a nod.
I had one
This
question.
is our last chance to nod, okay? Because everything else is, we're voting on.
Then we have real votes.
So this is Mike Dye. I think I'm very happy to see the definition of affordable housing in there. Reading as affordable housing serves those households whose income represent 30 to 60% of Boulder County's AMI. Could you expound just a little bit on the word serves? As in, like, is that, so I'm assuming that the, for two people, Boulder County's average AMI is $100,000 for two people, household of two, 30 to 60% would be $30,000 to $60,000. And so the total allowable income that would be spent on housing would be 30% of that. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Great.
Yes, I talked to Derek earlier to make sure I didn't totally screw that up, but yeah. Yeah, and I guess maybe we could use a different word than serves. I think it's individuals who of course reside in affordable housing units.
Got it.
Serves might be an odd term, but
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Before we nod? And that's not nod, go to sleep. This is a nod to move forward. Okay?
all right.
That's-
Nodding is all the commissioners, and then of course Mayor Pro Tem Mahol does not nod in these circumstances.
I don't vote. I don't nod. I don't.
You don't vote,
I
you
don't
will
react.
nod.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, let's take a 5-minute break. Then we'll come back at 9:30 and knock the rest of these action items off. All right.
Well, I imagine it'll come up in town reports, but I got a chance to meet our new sergeant, Sergeant Merriam, Asa Merriam, yesterday, and he seems like a really stand-up guy. He's already actually in place and working, and I think we're going to be well served by him in the community. And he told me a couple of things about why it's difficult to recruit Boulder County officers. For everybody like me who's wondering why it's taking so long, is that their commute time does not start when they go. Their clock time does not start when they commute. So if they live in, Broomfield, their time does not start until they get here. And so if they jump in they jump into their county vehicle and they start heading over here, and their 12-hour shift starts at 6 a.m., that means they might have to leave the house at 4:15.
Just like any other job.
Right. But
Yeah.
most people aren't working, but most people are not working.
They can turn on the blinking light and be here in 35 minutes.
Well, that's true.
I said one of the barriers for us getting additional people, because now you're turning a 12-hour day into a 15-hour day, which is very difficult.
All right. You didn't hear me gavel, so. Okay, let's move on to our action items. There's 4 of them. The first one is the housing needs assessment, the accessory dwelling unit ordinance.
All right, so there were 2 items that you all felt gave an out of 4 or felt were appropriate to move forward. So we have drafted official ordinances. So this is the ordinance where accessory dwelling units would be allowed to be constructed prior to your primary dwelling unit. So some of the things we did remove, though, is the Planning Commission didn't want it where the property owner had to at least reside in one of the structures, and there also there wouldn't be allowed more than 1 ADU. So all this is an ADU that can be constructed prior to a residential unit, but then the residential unit would need to receive certificate of occupancy within 3 years. And so that's in this language as well. So thank you to Attorney Madsen, who had drafted Ordinance 850 for you. I've offered a series of proposed motions for how you may want to move forward. You can approve the ordinance as written, you can approve the ordinance with amendments, or you can deny the ordinance. So questions, or this is ideally looking for a motion, and then it would move forward to the BOT.
Roger and I were discussing this a few days ago. We were both trying to figure out in the current code where it prohibits an ADU from being built first. And I read through things multiple times. I couldn't figure it out. I don't know if I'm missing something.
So there is let me get to my code.
Did you figure that out, Roger? 1696, I think it was.
Yeah. No, that's small wind. Well,
Accessory dwelling unit 1698.
98.
Yeah, Miranda, our question is that it's not an accessory dwelling unit because you're just building a house. So if you actually just go to staff, to building permit and build a house, it's not, how does accessory dwelling unit come up? So I would argue that we can do exactly what we want to do, but just let it stand and just reach the understanding that.
Then when the house is built, then we have the.
Then it becomes
Then
an
it becomes
accessory
an ADU.
dwelling unit.
Show that you're gonna live there and rent the other house is there.
Right.
The only people, honestly, is the fact that if you were thinking that, I really will, everyone will vote. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Roger Cornell, I'm sorry, I didn't even turn on my thing. The obstacle for the idea of being allowed to build just a small little quote unquote accessory dwelling, but just say it's a small one, that in your mind will become your accessory dwelling unit in the future, is that our code right now says that you could build that at the accessory setback. So you could build that 5 feet or whatever it is from your property line. But if you don't have another building there and it's not accessory, you're coming to town hall, and then they would have to approve a non-conforming structure.
Got
Is what would happen.
Hmm.
And then, then you could go forward. So, they're not allowed to approve that. That's why I brought up, a month ago at the workshop even, that possibly we should, I feel very strongly that it really shouldn't have been put in there because it's a dwelling place, people living there, the neighbors have their yard and this stuff, then bingo, there's a house, a dwelling unit with people and conversation and all those things that you have with the dwelling unit. That should just be, it's very small. What if it's just 25 feet as a setback as opposed to 5 feet? That's not much, but that's a big deal when you're a neighbor in medium density or especially HDR. So if you would just remove or change the requirement that all the structures need to be, it would meet the setbacks of a principal residence, then actually everything works. As opposed to the idea that if we would say grant that, okay, you can build 5 feet away and we just approved a non-conforming structure and then things change, someone else said, well, we decided not to build, we sell our property and they never build the second unit, then you've created a non-conforming structure.
Yep.
So you could go several ways. Certainly what you have described there works, but the idea of just removing the the setback would clear everything and make it all work just, without any administrative work down the line. And you already have that idea of showing that you're a resident, that you're going to stay there, because that's what we don't want. We don't want an absentee owner living and renting 2 units. So I don't know. So that's the way we saw it and thought about it, right, Tim?
Yep. But so your proposal then,
My proposal would be just to remove to change the accessory dwelling unit setback to the dwelling unit to a standard principal residence setback.
just have them both the same.
Have them both the same. All setbacks for dwelling units should be the same. And that's the way we had it when we recommended the Board of Trustees.
For all accessory,
No,
structures?
accessory dwelling units.
For all accessory structures or
No,
No.
dwelling units.
Yeah.
Dwelling units.
are,
Right.
are then the same setback as
The principal.
house? I like that idea. Yes.
Because it's not an accessory dwelling unit if it's the first
Right.
unit, right?
Right. I get that. Yeah.
And I always felt very strongly that, a garage, a shed, a chicken coop, whatever, is totally different from a dwelling unit.
Right.
And it was after I don't know exactly how it happened, but the Board of Trustees came back and changed. They didn't change it. They didn't take our recommendation. All the other 18 recommendations were approved and with the change of that one.
Roger, the history, all these things, why did they not take it? I'm really curious now.
I don't know, because I think it was the term accessory.
Right.
And there was one strong voice in
It felt it was too restrictive.
the Board of Trustees.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So
Now,
Miranda, what
now
do
Amanda's gonna read it more and say, no, you're absolutely crazy.
you- tell us we're all wrong.
I guess the conversation, of course, is related to yard and bulk in many ways, and that's not what's before you. So I guess I'm just wondering, are you wanting to see this come back to you with that, or do you want to let this continue forward and then we bring back a separate yard and bulk ordinance? And maybe I'll just quickly answer Commissioner Duggan's point. And so the way in which town has operated is there are a series of statements, of course, this is accessory to a primary unit. I think that's number one. But we talk about an accessory dwelling unit permit, that there's a requirement of a statement of primary residence. And so if you don't have if you don't have a primary residence, you don't have a statement of primary residence. And it's that language which got redlined in this ordinance that in our opinion as staff prohibits you from developing your accessory dwelling unit first, because you have no statement or proof of the primary dwelling unit.
Got it. That makes sense too.
So, but I guess then the second question is, are you looking to, are you feeling like you don't want to approve this tonight? You'd like to see it come back with the yard and bulk components, or do you want to handle it separately?
Well, because I think, Roger, that's a great point. Is that an accessory dwelling unit, I think in agreement with you, have the same yard and bulk as a
Right.
regular house.
Right, I think the yard and bulk, because when they come to the town, they don't need to show that they have, that they're a residence until they're gonna build the second unit.
Correct.
They're just,
Under current
they're
code, yes.
just,
Yes.
you know, well, even under this code, whatever.
I guess so, yes. Yeah.
So yet the code was written, yes, so if
Yeah.
it's not an accessory dwelling unit, this only kicks in when the second unit is built. And it may or may not even be built. That's why the idea that you can't create a non-conforming use, you know, if they would do that the way we're doing it now, it would be possible to do that. And if they never came back, then you have a non-conforming building there, which we're trying to stop not to do that.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if we'd even, you know, just make a motion to recommend to the Board of Trustees just to change the yard and bulk for the accessory setback.
I just want to confirm with Attorney Madsen, since that yard and bulk isn't a part of this ordinance and that's a chapter 16 change, is that appropriate, or should it come back before the planning commission
To
with
give
that
people
in
a
the
chance to weigh in, yeah.
Yeah, it would need to come back to the planning commission. I don't think it would be wise to do it as an amendment to this ordinance.
So then with the planning commission, since this was a public hearing, just motion to postpone
You
public.
could continue the public hearing to a date certain. So if you wanted to continue this hearing to the next meeting, that would be appropriate and you wouldn't have to do a new notice.
And then you'd come back to us with the revised ordinance.
I think with the chapter with the yard and
That's what I meant with
yeah,
revised.
yeah,
yes.
exactly. I think this ordinance before you sounds like this is all fine. We just have the yard and bulk considerations.
I think so.
Well, I guess I would have a question as to, do you even need E? Change to, I guess it's 2E, paragraph 2E, which refers to the timing. Do you need that?
All the 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
No, you wouldn't need that, you wouldn't need that.
No, because
You're just
they
building,
could just stay in that
yeah, you're just building a house.
compliance already, so.
Right, you'd be one step towards a tiny village.
Oh, gosh.
Knew it would happen.
Yeah.
I will say this, Commissioner Reese, you know, you raise a valid point there that we're talking about a structure up to 800 square feet that, as was pointed out by you earlier, that could end up being the primary home for the person for a pretty long time. And then if they got the opportunity to build, you know, to change the setbacks, and then that became, you know, they never built the second unit, you know, I agree. That was not something I had considered. And so I think that's a pretty important point.
So, yeah,
I'm sorry to make more work for you guys, but
So the primary residence would be the accessory dwelling unit.
right.
Vice
But
versa.
in the long run, it does clean up the process, I think.
It does.
Well, and it eliminates the 3 years.
Yep.
So yeah, I think Attorney Madsen, yes. And then so like minimal amendments to this section of code and then switching to the yard and bulk instead.
I think the 3-year thing becomes hard to enforce because like, what do we, like the town, we have the ability to like kick them out and evict them? No. Can we force them to sell it? I mean, I guess. Maybe.
We
But, like, it would-
foreclose, it becomes
Right.
town property.
Right, yeah.
And if it's a,
It wouldn't,
and
it
if
wouldn't
it's,
be clean, right?
and if it's a conforming structure, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And also then you don't have to remove the part about, or erase the requirement for proof of residence, because that'll come up when and if they decide to build a second house,
And
which
then,
is already in
then
the code.
if they end up living in a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot unit above their garage for the rest of their life, then that's their problem. And it's fine with us because it's up to all
Conforming.
the conforming codes. Yeah.
Super.
Okay.
A win-win.
One other question, not to throw one more thing in here. It seems like part of the reason we were doing this, as I was on the subcommittee, was that we were trying to meet some outcome requirements for a grant, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is still a change that would allow someone to build I mean, yeah, it still removes the limitation in many ways, because right now when someone comes to us to do an accessory dwelling unit, we say no because of that. I mean, we're still gonna want to remove that statement of primary residence, because that's why we say no, you have no primary residence, so we
Becomes
can't
their primary
permit.
Residence.
Right, we can't permit an ADU because you have no primary residence on the site.
So it still meets the intent of what
Yes.
you were trying to do. Okay.
Yes, it would allow someone to construct their
Okay.
tiny home to then allow for their tiny home village.
Show primary residence at that point?
No, well, we took it out. I mean, they're still in their application. They have to provide like statement of ownership and legal descriptions and surveys. So the only difference is we're not going to require a statement of primary resident, but we will require all the necessary documentation for an ADU permit.
And it's totally handled by staff.
Right.
Yep. So
We like that.
simplifies it, yeah. Still open it up for public comment? Is there anyone in the public wishes to speak? Okay. If not, we'll close public comment. And so the question at this point is, we still want to table it?
You're going to continue your public hearing to your
continue the
November
public
meeting
hearing.
date. Should they vote on that, Attorney Madsen? Yes?
Yes, it should be a motion to continue the public hearing on ordinance. Let's see, 850. And what is the November meeting date?
We don't know yet. That's the last thing to be
Yeah, that's the
determined.
last. Do we have to
Okay.
have a
Can they
meeting
just
date?
say November meeting date? Because it might,
Um,
because right now it's set for the day before Thanksgiving. So the last action item is an action to move it.
Which will probably happen, correct?
It will happen.
It will happen.
Okay, so then I would just say the November, whatever date,
29th.
29th.
I move that we
Okay,
could.
well, before you do that, I was remiss in asking if anyone had financial conflict of interest or financial implication here. And matter of fact, just to speed things up, I'm going to ask that for all of the 4 action items at once. Does anyone have any conflict of interest or any reason they need to recuse themselves? Okay.
Including the planning meetings? Or 7.4?
Oh, the first 3 action items,
No conflict.
no conflict. Okay. All right. So now we can make a motion and vote.
It's November 29th.
We haven't decided yet.
No.
but
Just say November meeting.
I move that we continue the public hearing on the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, 850 until the November meeting,
Have to pick a date certain, so it needs to be November.
Yes,
November 29th.
We're gonna already operate on the assumption you're moving your meeting.
I second.
Okay, take the vote, please.
All right. Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Cornell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser, Chair Williams.
Yes. Okay. So passed. Okay,
And-
moving on.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Before you move on, I think it would be appropriate for the record to provide direction to town staff, to me, to make an amendment or make changes to ordinance 850 that include changes to the use group table for accessory dwelling units, that they're consistent with primary dwelling, so that there's clarification, that there's direction from the planning commission to make that change.
And
Does
yard
that
and
make
bulk.
sense? Yes.
And they just say
Well,
so moved. I'm just,
I think,
Well, it doesn't have to be a motion. I think direction is fine.
so directed.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure that everybody was in agreement.
Yes, I believe we are in agreement.
you need to bring those
So-
knots
so-
back.
So directed. Thank you, though, for bringing that up. Okay, housing needs assessment, the administrative variance ordinance.
All right, we already kind of touched on this, but at your September 27th meeting, there was a discussion about allowing staff to do up to 15% administrative variances for all yard and bulk except for height. And the reason this comes up is oftentimes we're sending before the BZA lots that are just like slightly under, it's supposed to be 16,000 and it's 15,995. There's no administrative authority to grant that variance. So we're bringing it to the BZA. And so we really are looking for that opportunity to administratively do up to 15%. Again, minimum relief needed, but that would be decided administratively. So that is the ordinance before you. Same thing, you've got a series of motions for consideration.
Okay. Any questions? Comments?
And perhaps I can just share, I think we talked a little bit about it, but 15% is not a significant change. So for example, if someone had their side from the street was 20 as their setback, it could be reduced from 20 to 17. Like it's not these massive numbers, it's just slight adjustments. But for us, having that opportunity where if you take a 16,000 square foot lot and really they're just shy, we have that ability to go down to 13,600 administratively because they're just right there. But anything larger, of course, would go through the standard BZA process. But these remove, I think the last like 3 BZAs were like lots that were 200 square feet shy of their minimum lot area, but we had to run them through the BZA process.
That'll streamline it.
Yeah, it will help to remove,
Yep.
and I think even the BZA, they approved it within minutes because it's very clear this is just one of those kind of odd, but they don't meet the definition of a non-conforming lot, which is why they have to go forward to the BZA.
Okay. Let's open it up for public comment. Anybody have any comment? Wish to speak? If not, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to Planning Commission for any further discussion. Anyone want to add anything? At this point, comfortable with the,
I want to say that I think that this Commissioner Reese, I think this is a great way to empower our staff to handle some of these small, again, thank you for that example, that very small changes. And, it allows people, again, meets the intent of trying to help housing starts get going there. So I'm in full support of this.
okay, shall we have a motion?
Well, before I do, I just want to say, thank you, Miranda. I probably have served on the BZA more than any of the planning commission members as an alternate here lately. But, yes, it's such a small impact to BZA. Quite often, these type of issues maybe come up once a year, and Miranda's exactly right. Usually it's just that they're 50 feet short of their bulk. And so just to let everybody know that, it's not a huge change, and doing this administratively is the correct thing to do.
Powers of the staff. I like that. Me too. Okay,
I move to recommend approval of, I make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 851, amending Article 9 of Chapter 16 of the Town of Nederland Municipal Code to allow for certain administrative variances.
Second. That's Roger Cornell.
take the vote, please.
Commissioner Cornell,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser, Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese.
Yes.
Okay. So done. All right, let's move on to 7.3. And I don't know if we've ever seen this before, but the keeping animals ordinance
First time. No.
amendments.
I'll just do a brief introduction, but then I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Dye because I was way more focused on the housing world. So obviously you've been working on keeping animals for quite a long time. The last time this was brought to you last month was we had talked a bit about a variance process about what happens if an animal is not in the code and how could someone get it added, recognizing there's just a series of complexities that would make it hard to capture in code, and ultimately feel like if someone really is passionate about an animal that's not in the code, they can petition the Board of Trustees for consideration of adding it to the ordinance. So that is their process. Rather than a variance, they'll go through and ask for a code amendment. So didn't include that, but we did identify that perhaps there are some missing components based on some internal subcommittee conversations. So I'd love to turn it over to Commissioner Dye to go over those.
Yeah, great. So what you said is exactly accurate. The last meeting was pretty quick and dirty. And prior to that, Roger, myself, and Britt had met together and came up with a list of changes to the existing ordinance as written, or the existing revision of the ordinance as written. In reading through what's in the packet here, I can see that a couple of the things that we talked about, to my memory, and Roger, please correct me if I'm wrong, didn't make it into this revision. The big one that stood out to me, I can find my notes here, was in the pet fancier's permit section. And so the intent of the pet fancier's permit was to prevent people from animal hoarding and kennels, that kennels shouldn't be allowed. So that's the way that was in the ordinance as it is in town code today. The pet fancier's permit, I think, went a little bit, it got a little bit too broad. And as it's currently written, that would mean that the 9 fish that I have in my aquarium right now would not be permittable in town. And Roger, please correct me if I remember this differently, but in our conversation with Britt, we were going to rewrite this so it was just limiting the number of cats and dogs to 5 and having a permit to increase that. But the small animals, hamsters, gerbils, mice, fish, would be exempt from limitations. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, I agree. That was accurate. And
Okay.
I'll be honest, because the way you kind of worked it, I was working with the hoof animals.
Yeah.
That was near and dear to me, so I was
Yeah.
really pushing for my things with Britt but absolutely, I remember that conversation and it was more like, then after, okay, and then you work one-on-one with her, so how it panned out, I can't sit there and say right or wrong, but for sure,
Okay.
we were
Yeah.
trying to, that question came up and you were trying to, you expressed it exactly the way you just did.
Okay, great. I'm glad my memory is good for something. So that needs to be changed as written, and in talking with Miranda before the meeting, could either table it and continue it to next meeting when these provisions can be implemented, or we could
We can't
You
just,
can do a motion to approve with the following changes and then be very clear and specific
Yeah.
exactly what you're
work
changing.
on those changes and do it. Either way,
Okay.
if you have an idea of what you
Okay.
want to see,
Yeah, let's make sure before we do that, that there
well,
aren't.
no, I don't mean
Yeah.
to work on it, but
Yeah.
if we actually could come up with a sentence
Yeah.
or a small, short paragraph, I
And-
think that's a fair thing.
And so if it was just those changes, I think that we could probably itemize it and do that. However, I had a meeting earlier today with a very short notice because I'd just gotten this current draft with a local rancher that happens to own a bunch of yaks. And he had some really valuable feedback on the hoofed animal section that I'd really like to go over with you, Roger. He had some
So perhaps a
limitation.
tabling
Yeah.
is in order
Yes.
here to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we need to get this done. It's
Okay.
been how long?
2 years.
Let's go for 3.
Okay,
No,
so let's make
Yeah.
sure that there's no other issues to bring up here.
But I'm so curious now, what did he say about yaks?
Yeah.
Well, he's pro yak.
Yeah, I guess so.
So, yeah. So I'm not recommending changing this in the code because right now we've limited it to horses, goats, and llamas. His thought was that it was a speciesist, that if you, which I see his point, that, if you're going to allow goats, why wouldn't you allow sheep? And I don't want to open this can of, yeah, it is a slippery slope. And I'm not opening that can of worms, but I wanted to present what he said accurately. Yes.
Okay.
No worms. Those are not hooved. But I think he had some really excellent points. He also recommended that we add a requirement that they are certified weed-free hay in order to prevent contaminated seeds and noxious weeds from invading. I thought that was a very useful point. He had a bunch of little small changes, stuff that he found that wasn't really necessary or relevant. So like the limitations on mosquito and fly control, he said that as it was worded, it would literally be impossible to fulfill. And it's like giving fresh water every single day was kind of a silly thing. But like little details. So that's kind of the broad strokes overview.
So are you going to try to include some of these into the revised ordinance?
I think that's up to
Well,
Roger and I.
yeah,
Yes.
the committee,
Yeah.
subcommittee.
No, it's
Yeah.
up to the group here, I think, then.
Yeah.
If,
Yeah.
So you want some feedback from the committee?
I would love some feedback.
Well, I'd avoid the slippery slope, first of all. Yeah, let's keep it the way you advocating adding yaks or not?
I don't know. Probably not at this point.
Well, earlier we were
Yeah.
discussing
Yeah.
specifically excluding cows, right?
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I think if we think it's not acceptable to have a cow, then
Yes.
probably not acceptable to have
Yeah.
yaks.
I think as far as the number or the type of animals, the hoofed animals that we described,
Mhm.
and at their, the meeting, then the next meeting, and then coming up with, well, if this would come up in the future, then you have that idea of amending the rules. And, that would work across the board for everything. And so I think there was an agreement last month on that would be the process. So it seems like at this point, after all this opportunity to have someone weigh in and say, how about this, how about that? And then the issues about the water and the mosquitoes, I also had a thought that would parallel this would be that, oh geez, I forgot to talk to Britt and we had it in and then it got left, was the idea that the goats need to be locked up at night, put in the barn at night. And I said, well, I forgot, that's not in the final draft. But I think our ordinances guidelines and what is allowed and not allowed. And, to say, okay, it's too much water, not enough water doing this, there is just so much total responsibility on the animal owner that you just have to depend on. And to try to legislate all the what ifs, that's crazy. And so that's where I say, we did the broad, that's why I started out, you remember, with Miranda we had quite a few things and we got it down to, no, we want to just have outlines of what is allowed, not allowed. And if things come up, we will amend them as we go. So that's the way I feel about everything on this.
So I have a question, Ms. Chair Williams, with the current wording, is it clear enough that if an animal is not listed in the ordinance, that they are forbidden? Or,
Correct.
oh, it is correct, it's clear enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you walk us, maybe you show everybody, 'cause that would be the only one that would actually come back and said, oh my goodness, after 2 years.
So we talk about, that we have various language in here about what is allowed as an animal. And a lot of that is it just even in the definitions itself, where we describe domestic hooved livestock means horses, goats, and llamas. That's it.
Yeah.
And so really the definition is what keeps that from being, because some of the current code is like, or other similar animals or other domestic livestock. And that's what kicked it to state statute and what kind of carried us down the rabbit hole where this is domestic hooved livestock is the 3 animals. Again, but like pet animal, you see language like similar animal to a dog, cat, small bird, but an effort to try to kind of regulate that domestic hooved livestock, we limited the definition to be just the 3.
But do we need a sentence in it that says if they're not listed in the group, they're not allowed or something, just to be clear?
I'm gonna turn, I thought that there was, Attorney Manson, I thought that
I didn't see.
we had something in here that said,
Well, the one that we have is what I brought up at that meeting was for pets. And it's very clear which pets are allowed and not allowed. And I'm trying to find where it was the pet animals.
It means any dog, cat, small bird, small reptile, fish, and small mammal.
That's the definition. No, but then it's prohibited.
I guess I'm gonna turn to Attorney Madsen to maybe provide guidance on if she feels like from a legal standpoint, this is clear enough that if it's not a listed animal, it's not allowed, or if there should be that very clear statement.
So
I have a memory of reviewing that for that specific purpose, reviewing the ordinance for that specific purpose, and that I was satisfied that it did prohibit anything not listed, but I'm not quickly finding it now, and I'm having problems. It's not loading as quickly as I would like.
I can help you out. 797, care and keeping of animals. C, prohibited keeping of animals. It is unlawful for any person to keep, harbor, and care for or possess any animal within town limits which is not a pet animal unless otherwise provided by Article 6. So that was the one that's very clear for pets. And
Yes, that's right. That's right.
so
And I guess I would go back for domestic hooved livestock, is that whole section in here that talks about what's allowed a permit, which is only those 3 animal types. So I guess as staff, I feel comfortable because we removed a lot of that or other domestic livestock. It was that like or other that just really opened up us having to look at how was that defined in state statute and what did that mean? And then kind of carried us down to allowing a variety of different animal types.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if it was
for the purpose, so yeah,
prudent to
yeah.
Put in an overarching statement somewhere, maybe under definitions or something, but
So
just a suggestion.
I'm sorry. So the closest we have would be then the Article 6, domestic livestock, for the purpose of this Article 6 of Chapter 7. Domestic hoof livestock means horses, goats, and llamas, which is basically the definition. But I don't know, I mean, even taking the term right there and saying no other, or these are, just put out a statement would be the perfect statement. No other domestic or hoofed livestock animal is permitted. Or maybe that's just enough right there, because that's describing the three that are permitted.
So
But that's the one that we held to, so it's those two ones, the one for the pet and the one right there.
So this is Commissioner Reese. So I think part of the issue before was when it came to staff to be interpreted, the staff didn't feel like it was clear enough, and that's why it fell back previously on state statute. And staff is telling us right now, this is very clear. We can interpret this great. There won't be any ambiguity.
Right.
When somebody comes before us, we feel comfortable, the attorney feels comfortable. So I don't know that we should bend ourselves in knots trying to figure out a way to, like Roger said, come up with every contingency to say. I think it's pretty clear in there. And I almost wonder if we can't change the 5, the number that, to say this only, if we can't do an amendment to this and still pass it tonight by saying cats and dogs, that the limit of 5 applies to cats and dogs, and then go forward. Because, man, I just hate seeing the staff and the attorney have to continually come back and make these tiny little tweaks. They must be hating this ordinance by now.
Turn on your.
Yeah, turn on your microphone.
That was with the size limitation. This is Commissioner Glasser.
Correct. It's one domestic hoof livestock per first 1/2 acre. It's the way in which we quantify that, but I think that the comment that Vice Chair Reese was making was in regards to the fancier permit and just not having it be a little bit clear that that's specific to cats and dogs, and that would be, so you could make I believe, Attorney Madsen, please jump in, but motion to approve the ordinance with the condition that, with the change that the pet fancier be specific to dogs and cats and not have to bring this back.
It would be preferable to.
Does that work for Mike?
I feel like that kind of skips over a lot of the other points, and I'm trying to go back through my notes of what needed to be changed, because I think there were other things that didn't make it into this revision, which I'm trying to track down right now.
While you're tracking, I have a question.
Yeah.
So is it clear what the process is for someone to petition if an animal is not included?
So I think staff would have to guide them through that, and that's really a request before the Board of Trustees for a code amendment. I don't think that we would necessarily put that in the ordinance. We would just, as with anything that's not allowed in code, you go before the board and request.
Okay,
For
as
that
long as it's
consideration.
covered elsewhere.
Yeah, as staff, so if someone wanted to bring their cow, we would say it's not allowed in code. If they ask how do I get it, we would say go before the Board
Go
of Trustees.
petition.
Right.
Okay, so, because I didn't see it in there, I just wanted to make sure.
Right. But that would, yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I would say it doesn't need to be in code, because that's any code amendment. Anyone can petition the board for consideration of a code amendment.
Okay, as long as that's clear.
Yeah.
So people know what the process is.
And if there is a petition for a code amendment, is the public notified on that, the neighbors or?
I mean, yeah, the Board of Trustees would have to really decide how they wanted to handle that. So the unique thing is this got kicked to the Planning Commission, but it's a Chapter 7 amendment. It's not a Chapter 16. So it may not, it would be up to the board how they would want to approach that. And if they'd want to send it back to you all, since you worked on the original one, this is a unique one that you're working on because it's not technically the code that you typically oversee.
And just a point of clarification on amendments and ordinances, somebody could initiate an ordinance, get signatures on it, go to the registered voters in the town, get the correct number of signatures on it. And then that would go to an election, and people would vote as to whether they wanted to see that change in the code.
Overrules BRT.
Petition.
Correct.
Did you find, Mike, did you find?
Yeah, one of the other changes is in 7-122 for requiring the permit. This is for a permit for domestic code livestock. And the wording of the premises shall at all reasonable hours be subject to inspection by certain representatives of the town. One of my old notes was that was too unspecific, and it kind of implies that, any day, 9 to 5, city representative can drop in and and do an inspection. I thought there should be some notice given, and that should be reflected in the code.
This is Commissioner Reese. I kind of disagree with that because I think
Okay.
the intent is
Okay.
to be able to come without notice and see the conditions
Okay.
that the animals are under. And so if you say we're going to come tomorrow or in 48 hours, well, now I've got an opportunity to come clean up and
Mhm.
make sure that I get rid of the other extra animals I have on site. And so I think the reasonable hours, kind of covers it. But in my opinion, I think that they should be empowered to be able to come in, in the example you just used,
Yeah.
any weekday, 9 to 5.
Yep.
I think that's reasonable.
Yep. I'd agree with you, except for the fact that it says it's illegal to decline the inspection.
Well,
Or
then,
that-
then the problem would be
yeah.
that maybe
Yep.
I've got something to hide. I don't want you to see
Yep.
that I'm abusing these
Yep.
animals or I'm not meeting
Right.
what's in the town
Okay.
code. I think the whole
I see your
point is
point.
that we have to be able to come in and see, oh man, you've got 3 times the amount of animals that's allowed. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and then if they say, well, I'm not letting you on my property,
Mhm.
well, then that becomes a different issue, right? Then I don't know what the conflict resolution is there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's kind of important.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for law enforcement, but I think we did run this ordinance, of course, through law enforcement and they didn't express any concerns. And I think animal control really does in many ways when they have complaints that raise the level of perhaps abuse and neglect. They're not going to necessarily want to issue notice. They do need to see it in the environment in which it was complained upon. But yeah, I mean, if this got to a place where town is going to inspect and the person refuses, now they're in violation of the ordinance, and
Right.
then that's when law enforcement's gonna come in.
Yeah.
Code enforcement, whoever the appropriate party is, but
Yep.
likely in this case it would be law enforcement.
I think, Mike, it's back to, owners of animals and stuff. How would this come down? But it's gonna probably be, neighbors, it's gonna probably be something that went on quite a while. And if finally, because what does town's staff even had to bring? And when it finally came to an authority to come there, which, probably more than likely would never happen, but, that once in a year or whatever it is, that doesn't matter. Jim is exactly right, because it's probably something that's gone on for a while, and the need to show up and take action right then is actually, Jim said, very important.
Do you have
I
something
see your point.
else?
No,
No.
but I think that it's in a
Well, I
hand.
know, but I'm going to open it up to
Yeah.
public comment here as soon as we're done
Okay.
with any changes so that the public understands what we're trying to do.
No, I think I'm okay for now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Public comment, please open it up. May?
There. May Gerald, town of Nederland, horse owner. Appreciate your bringing that up. I think it is reasonable to inspect at any time during business hours. However, I did notice that determinations can be made by town staff. And in the past, I think we talked about having qualified professionals, maybe somebody from a veterinarian, a farrier, someone from the Humane Society, if there's a question, I mean, everybody's got an idea how to raise kids or how to house animals. I've been a horse keeper in town for 35 years, and there's never been an issue. So I welcome anyone coming by and enjoying the horses. I wasn't aware this was on the meeting tonight, so I didn't get a chance to really review the ordinance. It looked like a lot of the horse language has changed. I spoke at the last meeting, and you know, it's funny, you feel like you said your piece and you've been understood, but then you find out everything's changed. Britt had told me that the portion that was being proposed, that a horse corral had to be at the back of the property, was taken out. But in my case, I'm in medium-density residential. I saw, I think, that it's now going to be restricted to, what, low-density or mountain residential? Did you take MDR off the use group? Because my lot is over half an acre. I thought you did take it off, Miranda?
So,
always only
correct, it was only mountain residential, and so it's remaining mountain residential zones only. That's what the current use group table is.
Yep,
How did I ever get my permits then?
you were grandfathered in, you had a special agreement with the town administrator, I thought. That's what you've said numerous times. And we have not changed since, I don't know, the spring. I've specifically worked on the hoofed animals, and that has been, you know, the same. And if we change anything, I think, well, very small changes, but yes, from what we had at the last two meetings, that part has not changed. And the only thing I've actually changed was to say that you could have two goats instead of one, was one of the biggest changes that, you know, that I pushed for, because I had read that they're much quieter and get along much better if they have a companion. So no, I don't think, May, that, so if you saw a draft last month, certainly for the hoofed animals, it's the same draft.
No, I actually have been busy with other things like grouping people together to talk about the park. And so I haven't been reviewing it. My bad. I've been busy with other things, and it would have been nice. I've asked Tom for a back fence meeting a couple times, and he hasn't had the time, I guess. So I haven't been updated by my neighbor, who probably would understand that I'd be interested. So I just want to know how this is going to affect me. Thank you.
Thanks, May.
I believe maybe Kathleen called in, but I did have to mute you, Kathleen, so *6 to unmute. Kathleen, you may
Hello?
have.
Yes,
Can
go
you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, we can.
Kathleen Chipeye, Magnolia Star Route, 32-year resident, 22-year business owner. I'm for postponing this language for another time. One of the reasons I think there's so much confusion and that May's having confusion is when we're provided changes in language, we're supposed to see capital letters or underlining for new language, lines out through the language that's being removed. I have no idea. This is 16 pages, and I have no idea what's new, what's changed. I mean, this is another reason, I don't know who it was that proposed to postpone, but I'm going to agree there. He's not seeing the changes he thought were made. Part of the reason is it's not identified properly. Okay, but number one reason I'm against this language at all, the town continues to say if it's not in the code, it's illegal or unlawful in numerous subjects, including this animal language. We do not live in a dictatorship where rights are granted by the government. Nederland is in the state of Colorado in the United States of America, where we exist under a completely opposite premise. We shouldn't be writing language like this. If something isn't in the code, it is lawful. It's not unlawful. Okay, the administrator admits she only had to deal with one animal incident since 2019, and that perceived incident of abuse was turned out to not exist. No one was abusing animals or violating the code, and there was no need to change the code in this ordinance language. However, during those discussions, someone called in and said that when they called town hall to get enforcement, and they called Jen Feinlevin also, to get enforcement on barking dogs, they were told there was nothing in the code that allowed them to enforce, which was inaccurate. There's a whole section about dogs and cats. So that was actually a problem, apparently, that does need to be addressed. Number one, it was already in the code. Number two, the way you address it by not trying to ban every animal that you didn't list is you simply say, any animal that makes incessant noises, any animal that has an incessant smell, is illegal, okay? That's a violation. You don't go, I mean, I don't eat chinchillas. I don't know what the confusion was with the fish, but here 9 fish would have been illegal. This kind of nonsense language, that is not the way you write legal language. That's not the way you write the code. So that's disturbing to me that we keep doing this. And, my effort in all this is to protect everyone's rights. If you want a random miniature pig as your pet, it should be allowed unless there is incessant noise or smell or abuse. And none of those issues have occurred in the history of Nederland. And really all that needs to be changed is you include in the noise section the nuisance things about animals. You include any animal that makes continuous noises and the owner doesn't stop it. Any animal that has a smell that's offensive and ruins the happiness and peacefulness of the next door neighbor is violating the law, okay? But there are people like myself who I go out and pick up my dog's deposits on a daily basis. Okay.
Can you wrap it up, please?
There isn't going to be a smell, no matter how many dogs I have, because I'm picking them up. Okay. We want to. What are the issues that you want to curb? Well, you want to protect your residents' happiness and peacefulness as they live in their community. And the things that seem to disturb people: noise, smell, continuous from animals. I also think this goes way above and beyond. There's a typo, by the way, in the section that says a dog is only.
Okay, that we got your point. Okay, does Attorney Mattson need to respond to any of this legal questions?
I think yes. I had asked her earlier this week about the assertion that which is not specifically prohibited is allowed. And I got clarification on that. If she's still on, it's probably worth hearing.
Right, well, that's why I asked that question earlier.
I am still on, yes. And the town does have the authority to regulate animals. That authority is provided in the Colorado statutes. And so the town has the authority to regulate which animals are permitted and which animals are not permitted. Language in the regulations, the ordinances is that these specific animals are allowed and other animals not mentioned are not allowed. That is permissible under state statute. Colorado legislature has allowed municipalities to regulate in that area.
Okay, well, it probably makes sense given, I mean, the whole idea here is to really protect. It's not to, there are people who will never have a problem doing this, but then there are people who cannot, take care of animals properly, and there needs to be some mechanism in place. Okay, so, do we want to, are the changes small enough that we could make those changes in a motion, or do you feel you need more time as a subcommittee to make sure everything is correct?
I don't know. What do you think, Roger?
I think, I think that it's actually you, because you're the one that made the changes, so I'm okay with what we've done, and if maybe we just repeat exactly, because we kind of got around quite a bit. So just to clarify, so that when we make the motion, we have it specifically for staff to write the ordinance. I certainly am for going ahead, with, just amending with the motion and the change.
Is the commission comfortable with this?
It's up to Mike, and Mike should actually say, yeah, he's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. After that long speech, I kind of lost the train, went a little off.
Exactly what.
Yeah.
Miranda, if you can,
Yep.
did we even get as far as?
Can I give a public comment? Are you guys still taking public comment?
Yeah, we're just wrapping this last one up here.
Oh, okay, sir.
But yes, and then you'll go next. Okay, okay, why don't you go ahead now with your public comment?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for your continued work on this. I know Roger and I and Cynthia started it, yeah, a couple of years ago at least. I appreciate where you're getting to with it. I think you're making some good headway with digging the resources that, the
Coming in a little
whoever
muffled.
you talk to.
You're coming in kind of muffled. Can you say a
Oh,
little clearer?
just a sec. Can I just say that? Just a sec.
Much better.
So
There.
this is it's on animals, so it limits.
Sorry about that.
Okay, that's
there.
much better.
All right, sorry about that. First, I just want to say thank you and work you done. Roger and I started doing this. This is Billy Giblin, by the way, Tilden Street in Colorado, Old Town. Roger and I started working on this a couple years ago.
I don't.
And then some with Cynthia, and you guys have taken it to the next level, so I appreciate it. And I know kind of had to do a scrap and rewrite. So thanks for the work you're doing and the research you're doing, and I feel like you're making good headway. I do want to, the only thing I want to, one thing that Kathleen said that I do feel like we need to kind of look at in general for NMC changes is just really sticking with the underlying strike through method. Even if you're repealing or replacing, you strike through the whole freaking thing and then underline everything that's going in. It is best to have the old with the new. It just allows people to really see it all much more better. So I do recommend that we as a town just really consider going to that. I work for ResNet whenever we do standard changes, whenever ICC does standard changes, we all go through the ANSI method, and that is like required. So just want to recommend that. Instead of like all caps and just writing and doing. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Billy. Okay, so Mike, what's your feeling at this point?
You know, my
If you-
feeling,
If you want to continue it.
I would like to continue it.
Okay.
Yeah. And sorry, I am conscious of staff time. I'm very much looking forward to having this done as well. But I think that there are enough changes that need to be made that it's worth doing another revision.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay, then why don't you go ahead and make the motion?
Do you want exactly the change in thought?
Yes, we're gonna get a revised one next month. That's the whole point.
No, I mean, right now. Exactly.
Is your microphone on?
I mean, how
Yes,
many
any
different,
change, that's.
any
right,
changes we're going to
Right.
discuss?
Right, that's
Right.
correct.
I guess we didn't really get around to like the other sections of the code, if there was any feedback on that, which I'd like to do that as well. But the primary change was for the pet fanciers permit to restrict that, not to not focus on the dogs and the cats, and have no limits on the other types of pet animals. They're, yeah, I did feel that there could be some additional cleanup in the hoofed animals area. I take your point. I don't need to have the inspections language changed. Yeah, and like Billy pointed out, I think it would be a value to have a very clear outline of what has changed in the current code to the new one, so that we can really easily identify and analyze what's changed.
Okay, so those changes, there any other public comments before I close the public input? Okay. We'll close public comment, and any other, did you have some more comments that you wanted to make sure were included?
No. I think most of the comments that I had will be covered in the revision.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's
How do I do this?
make like we did before, just make a motion
Yep.
to continue.
I would make a motion to continue the keeping animal ordinance amendments. Ordinance 852
To the November meeting.
to the November 29th meeting.
I second.
Miranda?
Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser, Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Cornell.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry to.
Thanks. Sorry it's such a drag.
Push this off, but I agree. It really needs to be, correct, and it's a complicated one and it's long, so.
Well, it's only been 2 years, so.
Okay, let's move on to our last action item, and that is talking about what to do with our November and December Planning Commission meeting dates. Given the fact that I don't think people will support us having a meeting on Thanksgiving Day and one on Christmas Day. So those dates should be out. So go ahead, Miranda, and
Yeah,
give us some background on what's coming up.
Yep. So right, your planning commission November date falls the day before Thanksgiving, and just recognizing that your December meeting, while not on the holiday, falls very close to the holiday. And so I want to be mindful of maybe some travel plans. In the past, we have often combined November and December's. That's really not feasible. Not only have you moved quite a few things from tonight to go into November, you also have anticipated a planning and development hearing, as well as the Wingate property coming down. And so it's really preferred to have both meetings still, because you still have quite a bit of stuff you're working through. So some recommendations we made as staff was to move the November meeting back a week to November 29th, and move the December meeting up a week to December 20th. And so we offer some proposed motions of how you could do that.
Okay, first of all, those dates seem agreeable. I don't even have to have their calendars with them, but we could do a nod. 20th. Okay, it seems like that's everyone's.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, hearing no objection, it's an action item, so we need to vote on it. I guess we should open to public comment. Good point. Yes, it's an action item. We should do that. Public. Because you'll probably attend.
I probably will.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, anyone else online that public comment? Otherwise, we'll close public comment and no further discussion. Let's Let's vote.
I move to approve the rescheduling of the November meeting to Wednesday, November 29th, and the December meeting to Wednesday, December 20th.
Second.
All right. Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser, Commissioner Cornell, Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan.
Yes.
Okay. So moved. That's funny. Got to use the gavel. Okay, staff reports are next.
Steve,
And do you,
can I get excused, guy? Yeah, I told my wife to be home at 10 o'clock and I need to just make sure she's okay.
okay,
All right.
you could probably, you've already read the staff report anyway. Okay,
We had lots of photos. Yes, I'll just do some, just a couple of quick highlights. And mainly I'll just focus on really the things that are coming before you, but also just want to start with what Vice Chair Reese was speaking of during the break is that we do have a sergeant, Sergeant Asa Merriam. Sergeant Merriam in a sergeant position, so basically serves as our marshal. So he'll oversee police operations, police services for the town of Nederland. He is a Boulder County Sheriff's Office employee, but is our dedicated sergeant. And by becoming our dedicated sergeant, has a 3-year commitment in this role to the town. So the other great thing about Sergeant Merriam, he's actually been our extra duty basically every Monday for a year. And so he's become very familiar with us, of course, supported us when we had our own law enforcement, 20 plus years in law enforcement, and he's gonna be a great addition to our team. We've got 3 cadets currently in academy. When they go out of academy, they'll move on to FTO, assuming they all pass through FTO. We'll have those 3 officers dedicated to town and a full team, hopefully end of Q1. A couple of things, Destination Blueprint is kind of another extension of a lot of this tourism management that we're doing. I've sent you all emails, but if you have the availability to come to one of the 2 events, there's a networking on Monday, the 30th from 5 to 7, and then a workshop on the 31st from 9 to 1. But just kind of a continuation of the work Godot's doing, but just more from the management plan side. Something really cool that recently happened is town, in collaboration with Gilpin and Clear Creek, applied for a $12 million grant to extend broadband to our community. So keep your fingers crossed for us. Hopefully that works. There's actually, the town actually didn't contribute a match. I did ask the board last night to commit 40,000 though, if we are awarded funding, to help with direct cost. And so rather than passing fees on to users to extend the network into their homes, we could provide financial assistance to do that. If we don't get the capital project funds for broadband extension, we will go for BEAD funding and we'll just keep going. We have the application, we're just going to move it from funding source to funding source.
So broadband is coming, or? we're just-
Hopefully, we need the money.
Okay,
It's coming. I mean, there's billions of dollars out there. We just need to find the grant application that will say yes. We have a very competitive application. Between the 3 of us combined, we reach a 65% under or unserved population, and that makes us a very highly competitive grant. So we're very confident we'll get funding in some capacity.
yeah, since our CenturyLink went out last night yet again.
Yeah, so, and also looking at redundancy, you know, of course, we want to extend fiber and bring up, you know, allow kind of diversity in ISPs, but we also need the redundancy. So when people go down, Gilpin County's emergency services has gone down many times where they've lacked dispatch. I mean, it's critical for them, and they've been doing a lot of work, and I was able to like sneak Nederland in there last minute. So it was great. So thankful to them. And then last thing is we're just deep into the budget. The board had their first budget work session last night where we talk about a lot of high level, looking at a variety of different revenue sources. Of course, the board did disapprove increases in wages, which is going to put a little bit of a strain on the budget. It puts our staff at being appropriately paid, but we really need to get creative in revenue. So I threw a lot of questions at the board. They hung on for till almost 11, and we're working through some things, but would encourage you to attend those if you're curious about the budget. And that brings me to kind of what's before the board. What's coming before the board is their meeting on the 7th is a dedicated meeting to the budget only. So there's nothing else that will happen that night but the budget. And then on the 21st, there's a trustee vacancy. So they'll assess how they want to handle that vacancy. We're working on a styrofoam and plastic bag ban, as well as reinstating the plastic bag fee program. So that ordinance will come forward. The Teens Inc. childcare proposal comes back. We'll hopefully be able to talk about some election code amendments that need to happen before the next election, and then some employee handbook changes. So that's what's coming before the board before your next meeting.
Very good. Thank you.
And then hopefully after your next meeting, everything you're working on will kick over to their end and they can start working on it.
That's right. We'll trade.
Right. Trade it to the board.
Okay, well, we did better than I thought we were going to do. Thanks, everyone, do we have any other business to discuss before we?
Maybe I'll just quickly mention this. Attorney Madsen just noted that technically our bylaws have the planning commission that would end at 10 with 2 extensions, where you have to end at 11. We added that into the bylaws when we amended them, and I think we all forgot. So I'm going to resend these out, and then in the future at 10 o'clock, you have the ability to make your motion to extend. You can do up to 2 with a hard end at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock.
Yeah, I thought we talked about that before and we didn't have that. The board has that.
Right, you didn't, but then when we amended your bylaws last year, we added it in, and then we just like
Remember adding
didn't
them in, but-
really. Yeah, we didn't think, we haven't
Sure.
implemented it. These are the
Okay.
approved ones. These are the adopted ones.
Okay.
So just,
All right, well, otherwise we would have.
but
done-
technically we're ending before 11, so
Well, I
but
know,
I'll-
but if you go past 10 is what you're saying.
you would make an
we'd-
extension,
we'd have to
motion
make
to
an
extend.
extension, which we didn't do.
Yeah, so we did not do that, but I'm just acknowledging that this was a change and,
Okay.
and
All
we
right.
can and we should. So we'll bring that
We'll
back.
make note of that for
Yeah.
chairing the meeting.
And I'll send out the bylaws again so everyone has them, because I too.
All right. Okay. Nothing else?
I have my microphone on.
And
Finally, I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Is anyone opposed?
nope.
All right, meeting adjourns at 10:46.
He did. All right. Until it comes.
An email from the staff saying you gotta bring these back into town hall. Yeah. Is that right, Brandon? Well, you'll send us a note when we gotta bring these to town hall?
Yeah.
I asked.
Well, the
him
difference
that.
is this is all 5 of his projects. It's not just
Right.
one central business. So it's all,
But-
he's bringing everything before us at one time.
Yeah, I've got like
Yeah.
3 of these at home.
Right. I do still.
Yeah.
have it.
And so, but this is a combination of
Yes, all. of it.
with changes.
Right.
So